Boom, and we're live.
Welcome back to Only Talk Sports and Jackson Johnson's channel as well of the Jacksonian. Tonight, we are going to be reacting to the initial college football playoff rankings. It's here. The AP poll is out the door. Nobody cares about it anymore. They care about the CFP rankings because those are the rankings that are going to determine at the end of the season who makes the college football playoff. So that's going to be crazy. I'm looking forward to breaking this down with you, Jackson, tonight. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me on, Jeffrey. And it's always an honor being on Only Talk Sports, where you talk sports every day, or at least you try to.
Definitely. I've been on a roll lately. I don't think I've missed a day in about a month. So appreciate you being on and appreciate everybody for being here as well. It means a lot and definitely can't wait to get into it. So right on the screen, you see the top 4 teams in the land in college football. In the AP poll, this is not what you see. The only one that is in the same spot as they are in the AP poll is Florida State at number 4. They are number 4 in the AP poll as well. But the top 3, the order is completely different. Ohio State is the number 1 team in the college football playoff rankings, whereas in the AP poll, they are number 3. Georgia's number 2 in the college football playoff rankings instead of being number 1 in the AP, and Michigan's number 3 in the CFP rankings instead of being number 2 in the AP. What are your initial thoughts of the top 4, Jackson? Are you shocked that it's like this, or is this what you expected?
I got to be honest, when I'm looking at number 1, I think Mark Rogers and the CFP rankings think quite alike, because I saw the Mark Rogers rankings the other day, and he had the Ohio State number 1, Florida State number 2, Michigan number 3, and Georgia number 4. But I am surprised that they didn't have Georgia number 1, because like Georgia's the 2-time defending champs. And they've been doing pretty good despite the fact that they don't have Brock Bowers for the rest of the season. But I understand why Ohio State's number 1, because they have the best resume in all of college football, including 2 of the top wins against Notre Dame and Penn State.
Yeah, I'm with you. I felt that Georgia was going to be number 1 in my mind because of the fact that they've been the 2-time national champions last 2 years. And outside of a couple games that they've been a little shaky, like the South Carolina game and the Auburn game, they've been fairly solid. It's not like we've ever gotten to a point where Georgia, people were saying that they're just not a good team. Like, even though they're undefeated, they're not clearly nowhere near the best team in the country. When you look at eye test, the best team is probably Michigan based off the eye test, but they haven't played anybody. You look at Georgia based off the eye test, they look pretty good. I mean, they have not been bad. They've had a couple shaky performances. But like you said, Jackson, Ohio State's resume is why they're the number 1 team, because they've got the win over Notre Dame. Even though it was in the last play of the game, in the closing seconds of that game against Notre Dame, they still pulled it out. So it's a win. And then they beat Penn State by 8. Those wins are why that they are number 1. But I do believe that Georgia, based off what they've done, had an argument here. But since the committee goes so much off of your resume, Ohio State's resume is clearly better than Georgia and Michigan's, because Michigan hasn't played anybody yet. I mean, that's been the talking point. They still got Penn State and Ohio State coming up on the schedule, and if Michigan can win those games, they'll surely move up. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm not too shocked, because when I thought that resume possibly would have been what they went off of, then I felt, yeah, Ohio State's probably going to be number 1. But the only other team that could have been number 1 in my mind would have been Georgia. But like we said, it's because of resume.
Well, Jeff says in the comments that Georgia should be number 1 until they lose.
And see, that's the AP way. The AP is going to have them number 1 until they lose. I mean, we saw what Michigan's been doing all year, just demolishing everybody, and they gained a few extra votes, but they never had enough to be the number 1 team in the AP poll. That's the way the AP poll does it. If you're number 1 at the beginning, as long as you keep winning and you're impressive enough while doing it, you're not going to fall a spot. But the CFP rankings, they don't play by the same rules, so that is why they stayed at number 1. With Ohio State, and Georgia's at number 2. But Georgia number 1 in the AP, like I said, completely agree with you, Jeff, but that's not the way CFP does it. Brock says Roll Tide Bama still at number 8. Definitely. We will get to the Crimson Tide. Appreciate you for being here. Steven does no Georgia play knowing along with Michigan. See, he's going off a resume. That's why Ohio State again is number 1. You have any few more thoughts on the top four? Because definitely it's a big deal for sure with these four teams being at the top.
Well, we'll say if LSU does beat Alabama for a second straight year
Mm-hmm.
this week, guess who that helps? That helps the Florida State Seminoles, and it gives them a chance
Mm-hmm.
to get in the top 3 next week. They can say, we beat LSU week 1. We got out the belt and gave them a spanking, and they beat Alabama in their own backyard.
Mm.
Where's our top 3 ranking? That's what's going to happen if Florida State was to win against Pitt, which, who am I kidding? They'll beat Pitt. But then again, don't doubt Pittsburgh, especially when it's at Pittsburgh.
Oh, I never do. But it's not on the CW, though. If it was on the CW, I'd be really concerned for Florida State. But it's not on the CW. But I will say, the interesting thing with Florida State is because their schedule has been easier than these other 3 teams, or it's going to be easier than the other 3 teams, Florida State cannot lose. If they lose a game, their chances of making the playoff go down big time. I wouldn't say that they'd be automatically eliminated, but chances are they'll be eliminated. They need a lot to go their way. Whereas you look at Ohio State and Michigan, the loser of that game is probably in, as long as they don't lose another game. And then you talk about Georgia. If they lose one game, they're in the playoff. If they lose to Tennessee and then they lost to, just say, Alabama in the SEC championship game, they'd miss the playoffs. But if they only lose one game, they're in. So the top 3 teams, all they have to do is just make sure they don't lose more than one game, and they're in. Florida State, however, doesn't have that same luxury. They have to play good football and be undefeated, in my mind, more than likely, if they're going to make the playoff.
Yeah, I mean, that's for sure. And I know Michigan's resume looks a little sloppy. However, 2 of the teams they beat, Nebraska and Minnesota, are in a dogfight one another for the Big Ten West division. So, I mean, that may count for something. I mean, especially when Minnesota snapped the losing streak against Iowa.
Yeah, which, right now, the Iowa offense is so bad that finally reckoning has occurred. Iowa has decided to, it looks like, move on from Brian Ferentz. So their offense might be better. That's why Minnesota got the win, though. You talk about the fact that when you're saying that Michigan's best wins are over those teams, and whoever can possibly win the West, that will help. I don't really think the committee is going to take much stock in that. As much as you'd love as a Michigan fan for it to matter. It's like, well, we beat the team that won the West. It's like, yeah, the West is not good, though. There's not a good team in the West. And what I mean by a good team, I'm talking about a top 30 type team, a team that can hang with a Penn State, or a team that can hang with a Utah or something like that. Teams in the West, most of them are very average. So, but yeah, I to your point, it helps Michigan a little bit, but where it's going to help them the most is if they get the Penn State and Ohio State wins for sure. Steven says, what if Penn State beats Michigan? Their only loss would be Ohio State. See, that's another good point, and we're going to get to some of those teams further down because they're still in play. That's a good point, Steven. I've thought about that. Penn State wins out and only has the one loss, they could get in. It's not impossible that they could not get in because their only loss, especially if Ohio State, is undefeated, and then you'd say that Penn State's only loss is by 8 at Ohio State, that's undefeated, and would probably be the number 1 team. That would probably be enough to get Penn State at number 4. That is an interesting scenario that could happen. Traveling Fools is here as well. Appreciate you.
Yo, Traveling Fools.
Definitely. Wish Miami was higher in these rankings for you if, get back to the glory days. Still waiting for that, but it will happen, I think, eventually. Sports Talk with Austin's in the building. Appreciate you for being here. Says, no disrespect to Michigan, but I would have Florida State 3 minutes. Well, that's based off resume because, to your point, Austin, Florida State has the LSU win. Michigan doesn't have any big win. So if you're going off resume, you could argue based off resume that Ohio State should be number 1. Then it would probably be Florida State at number 2 or Washington at number 2 or number 3, vice versa. Whether you count the Washington win over Oregon is better or Florida State's win over LSU, then probably Georgia at 4, Michigan at 5. But I think the committee still took into account that Georgia and Michigan still look really good, and that even though they really haven't gotten a big win yet, they deserve to be higher than those teams. Plus, Florida State's been shaky a couple times. They haven't been perfect. And,
especially against
outside the
Boston
LSU win, there's
College.
been a lot of games that they've just beaten really nobody. The Clemson win was good, but Clemson's
Yeah.
fading.
Yeah, Clemson's just looking sloppy. But I do have a question regarding one of Michigan's wins, and that's Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if Nebraska was to end the losing streak against Wisconsin and then beat Iowa, which we know they're going to beat Michigan State and Maryland. I mean, Maryland's the Syracuse of the Big Ten, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Will that Nebraska win? Will that Nebraska win have more merit? Will it? Because I mean, Nebraska hasn't lost a game since they lost to Michigan.
Yeah, I think it's going to play a bit of a factor in their resume at the end of the day, especially if they have one loss. Like if Michigan does lose to Penn State or Ohio State and they have that one loss and they're trying to compare them to another team with one loss to get in, then I think that having another quality win like that will help boost them. You want your resume to be as good as possible when you're in play, to possibly not make the playoffs. That's when your resume matters more. When your resume doesn't really matter if you're the top two teams and you're undefeated. It's not as important as it is if you're in the 4 to 5 range and you're being compared to other one-loss teams. If Michigan loses and that's how they have to get in with their resume, then yeah, if Nebraska keeps playing well, I do think it will play a role. Troy V has a great one though. Hey, you guys don't know what you're talking about. Michigan beat UNLV. Laughing out. Barry Odom. He's got them at 6-2. They're not bad.
Oh man, he's been amazing.
Could be Fresno though, but they're better.
Oh, I mean, Vanderbilt will tell you they're don't play UNLV, you guys. Don't play UNLV. They will bite you like a chicken nugget.
So I guess before, to maybe move on to some of the next teams, but of the top 4 teams, what ranking surprises you the most where they're at of the top 4?
I was honestly surprised about Ohio State being number 1.
Me too. I get why, we said with the resume, but yes, I am a bit surprised by that.
And I'm a little bit surprised about Florida State being below Michigan at the moment, but it's like I said, Florida State's going to have to pull for LSU this Saturday and also beat Pittsburgh on Saturday as well.
Yeah, Florida State cannot lose to Pitt. That would definitely really hurt their resume. But up next, you've got 2 Pac-12 schools right below Florida State. You've got the Washington Huskies at number 5, who are undefeated as well, like the top 4 teams. And then you got the Oregon Ducks. At number 6, at 7-1, the highest team ranked in the CFP with the loss. And if Oregon had have beaten Washington, there's a shot Oregon's possibly in the top 4 at number 4 or maybe 5. They could still be behind Florida State, but getting that win at Washington would have been an insane win for Oregon. And the way that they've looked, that's why Washington, I think, is below Florida State, because they've had some, games where they've struggled, like the Arizona State game, like the Stanford game recently. So I think that Oregon, still is definitely in play if they can just find a way to win out and play great football, because outside of the loss, because they have the loss, Washington's got the win. Oregon's looked better, I think, throughout the whole season than Washington has.
Well, I am looking at Washington's resume, and I mean, besides that Oregon win, I mean, their second best win, I'd say, is against Arizona. Unfortunately, I can't say I'm too proud about that Boise State win or that Michigan State win, because I mean, this is not our daddy's Boise State. This is not our daddy's Boise State where they were just smacking everybody around in conference play. This is poor, pitiful Boise State where they're blowing 20-point leads in the final 4 minutes against Colorado State. I mean, that's bad. Michigan State, well, they're this year's Michigan State. It's not Mark D'Antonio or Duffy Darrington Michigan State. I mean,
of course not. And I would say with Boise State, they're still decent, but it's kind of one of those deals where I think if Boise State didn't have that run, that they had for about 15 to 20 years where they were really good, then no one really would be considering them as, a quality football team now. Because, for me, I still think of them as really good. And when I watch them play, I mean, like last Saturday, they looked good against Wyoming. They got a 32-7
Yeah.
win. So they have their moments where they show flashes of old Boise. But it is few and far between, and it's a lot rarer than it used to be. So, yeah, definitely that win for Washington is just not going to, really help their resume in any way. And then, you mentioned the Michigan State win. Yeah, Michigan State's awful. So, and we know why. They'll probably, hopefully get it turned around. But an interesting question that I have for you, Jackson, and I know it's impossible to, to basically answer because we don't know. There's so much, left to be played. Washington's got a tough game against USC coming up, this week. There's a lot of stuff that could happen. But do you think that there's a better chance that Washington makes the playoff or Oregon?
It's a good question. I mean, if Oregon's beating Washington
Mm-hmm.
in the Pac-12 title, then it's Oregon, of course. But if
Mm-hmm.
Washington's unbeaten at all of the point during the season, they're in. And especially with the fact that they got a tough game against USC this week, then they got a big home game against Utah, and then the week before rivalry week, they have to go to Corvallis, Oregon to play Oregon State. Do not underestimate Oregon State, folks. I mean, that is a bad move. I'll tell you what. And Washington State, they've been pretty sloppy. I mean, that's the easiest game on the slate. But then again, the last edition of the Apple Cup, do not expect that game to be easy because rivalry week is one of those weeks where everybody just takes off the record books. They don't care about the record books, stats, nothing. It's all about who's going to spoil the season the most.
For sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you
mean,
talk about Washington State, though. I mean, that's a good example of a team that you just cannot rely on your QB and nothing else. They got no run game. They have nothing going their way. It's all Cam Ward, basically like Shadur Sanders as well at Colorado. You cannot take pointers from these teams. You need more than your QB. But that still makes you a dangerous team, especially when that QB is having a lights-out game. Cam Ward can knock off anybody if they're playing at their best. So, to your point, Washington has a brutal end of the schedule. And the way they've played the last couple weeks, they're going to slip up in one of those games. More than likely, you would think. I mean, could they go undefeated? Sure. If Penix is throwing for a ton of yards and the defense steps up for Washington, yeah, I think they can win out. It's hard, but they could. But the way they played the last 2 weeks, they're probably going to lose a game. It's very possible. Yeah. So, I mean, if you have a one-loss Washington and a one-loss Oregon, and they play each other, then I would say that Oregon possibly is looking better. And that's to answer Sports Talk with Austin's question. Who's the better team, Oregon or Washington? I would say that the more complete team is Oregon. Right. I think that Penix, Rome Odunze, that passing attack is a little bit better than Oregon's. But Oregon's got the better run game. Oregon's got a bit better of a defense, and that makes them a better team. But see,
that's the key right there.
Washington won the game. It was at Washington, though. If the game was at Oregon, there's probably a good chance Oregon wins. And Oregon was this close. But it's kind of one of those deals where people's, I guess you would say, opinion of both teams is skewed because of who won. But who won the game doesn't always, reflect on who's better. I mean, like, if Notre Dame beat Ohio State, for example, this year, I think vast majority of people would still say Ohio State's the better team, even though Notre Dame won the game. Here, Washington and Oregon are kind of so close to each other, hence the rankings, Washington 5, Oregon 6, that it's more debatable. I think it's close, but I do think Oregon's the better football team than Washington. It's just Washington won, they're at number 5. But I do believe if Oregon beat Washington, they'd be probably number 4.
Yeah, I mean, they'd probably be ahead of Michigan because, I mean, there's a lot of feeling on Michigan that Michigan probably shouldn't be in the top 4 at the moment with what's going on at the NCAA. But you didn't come here to hear about Michigan and the NCAA. You came here for some reaction to the college football playoff rankings of 2023.
For sure. I mean, as long as nothing comes to fruition with that, Michigan's making the playoff, you would think, as long as they don't lose 2 games. It'd be tough to see them losing, the Penn State and Ohio State game. But you never know. They could. But another interesting question I have, and I'm sure that the answer is probably obvious, I would think. Do you think it's more likely we get a Pac-12 team in the playoff or a Big 12 team?
That's a good question. I mean, it depends on who it is. Like, if Texas is the Big 12 champ, I
Mm-hmm.
think Texas gets in because they got that win over Alabama in
Mm-hmm.
Tuscaloosa. That's something nobody has done since '07. Be a non-conference team that beats Bama in Tuscaloosa. I
Yeah, and that
mean,
was when they were not good. That was Saban's first year. That's when they lost to
yeah,
UL Monroe.
yeah.
So yeah,
And
that's a long time to be a non-conference, team and not win in Tuscaloosa. That's insane. That's dominance right there from the Crimson Tide. But yeah, I think I'm with you. If Texas wins out, that's your best chance
true.
for the Big 12. If Oklahoma wins out, it's a little bit murkier. But speaking of
Yeah.
such, Texas is number 7. And I'm not shocked by that. I know some people would say head-to-head, kind of like how Washington's ahead of Oregon because of head-to-head, but also the win-loss record. They have to be ahead of Oregon. But Texas is ahead of Oklahoma, even though Oklahoma won. But to me, the reason why is because of the fact, like you said, Jackson, Texas got the massive win at
Mhm.
Alabama, which is better than anything Oklahoma's done, including beating Texas. Beating Texas is great, but it's on a neutral site. And Alabama, in my opinion, I think beating Alabama on the road is a better win than beating Texas on a neutral site. But that's just me. And I think that because Texas is the better win than Oklahoma, and Oklahoma has the worst loss, losing to Kansas is worse than Texas losing to Oklahoma. That's why the Longhorns are higher than Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean, that Kansas win on week 5 massively helps as well
Mm-hmm.
because guess who Kansas beat for the first time since '97? The Oklahoma Sooners.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah. I mean,
That's
Lance
crazy.
Leipold's making some history. So, I mean, I'm sure that came into consideration. The committee members were thinking, who's that Kansas win over Oklahoma help again? Oh, Texas. Right. Right. They beat Kansas in week 5 on ESPN. Right.
That definitely was self-sabotage. Now, another interesting question. I know it's irrelevant because they lost, but if Oklahoma was undefeated, where do you think they'd be?
I would say above Washington and the Oregon Donald Ducks.
So you would have them at number 5 behind Florida State.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm tempted to just punish Oklahoma for having that easy peasy non-conference schedule, but at the same time, it's like I can't stay too mad at Oklahoma because they got that big win over Texas at the Red River rivalry. So I mean, you want to win me over, win your big rivalry game.
For sure. I think if Texas was undefeated, they'd probably be number 4. I think they
Oh
would
yeah,
be, above Florida State because of the fact that they would have the Oklahoma win and they would have the Alabama. They might be number 3, actually. They might be number 3. If they had both those wins, the Longhorns would probably be that high. And that's why they're at number 7, right behind Oregon with 1 loss, because that Bama win holds a lot of weight. Now, Steven, he says Alabama should be behind Oklahoma, and that is our next 2 teams right there. Alabama is at number 8, and Oklahoma is at number 9. And I
yeah.
get Steven's point there to an extent, but Alabama, most people would say just off the eye test, they're better than Oklahoma, I would think. Now, that could change this week if they lose to LSU, but what are your thoughts on if Alabama being ahead of Oklahoma?
I was surprised, honestly. I mean, I was surprised by the 7 through 9 as a whole. I was surprised about Oklahoma not being above Texas still, and I was surprised about Oklahoma being behind Alabama. But I think the strength of schedule has hurt Oklahoma a little bit because besides that Texas win, they don't have a lot they can hang their hat on. I mean, SMU's really good, yeah, but what about Central Florida? No, they're pitiful. They're pitiful. But Iowa State's a great win, though, because, I mean, Iowa State hasn't lost any games since.
Yeah, that's true. I think another reason why Alabama is ranked ahead of Oklahoma, and there you go. I was gonna say it. Thank
Ole
you,
Miss
Sports
and
Talk with Austin.
Tennessee.
Ole
Yep.
Miss and Tennessee are good wins. They are. Ole Miss is number 10. I'm just going to scroll down and include them since we're talking about Ole Miss right there. Alabama has a win over the 10th ranked team in the country, and they have a win over Tennessee. And they beat A&M on the road. A&M, not great this year, but that's still a tough place to win at. So Alabama's got quality wins. I think that Alabama being at number 8 makes sense because their resume is better than Oklahoma's, I think, overall. And then you talk about the losing. Texas, they lost to Oklahoma. Alabama lost to Texas. Oklahoma lost to Kansas. Oklahoma has the worst loss of the 3. And Alabama has better wins than Oklahoma does overall. Oklahoma's a great win with Texas, but Alabama's got more collective good wins. So I think that this makes sense because you could tell that the committee's really going off resume, and that's why you look at Oregon. They've got a lot of things going for them with how they've looked. Yes, they lost to Washington, but they've looked really good with Texas, Alabama, Oklahoma. You can really see they were going off resume, I think. Texas, they put ahead of Alabama because of head-to-head, and they've looked really good outside of the Oklahoma loss. Alabama's got good wins, and it's Alabama. And then Oklahoma got the worst loss, got a good win. But I think this actually makes sense. If Oklahoma was ahead of Alabama, I probably would disagree, to be honest.
Yeah.
I do. And plus, like Giggs Squid objectively, Alabama should be ahead because of the 6-win streak. They've been looking really good. They've been playing better. I know the Arkansas win wasn't impressive, but a lot of teams have struggled. A lot of teams have barely won games this year. So, I mean, Alabama took care of business. And to Steven's point, Texas smoked Alabama, but that was week 2. That was week 2. Alabama's playing better football now. I know that's, not necessarily objective, but I mean, Ohio State lost to Virginia Tech in 2014, and then they turned it around. So it's not impossible, but that is a really interesting point. But do you agree that Ole Miss should be at 10, Jackson, or do you think that another team should be at number 10?
I think Ole Miss is perfect right where they're at 10. And plus, they get a shot to earn their way into the top 5. Because, I mean, before they go against Georgia, they got to go through Texas A&M, of course, on Saturday. But next Saturday, they got to go to Georgia. And you said on one of your videos that Ole Miss, well, that was last night, by the way, Ole Miss has a way of collapsing in the month of November. Are we seeing that again this year?
I'm going to be really intrigued to see that. And it's weird with Ole Miss because, like, last year they were 7-1 and then they collapsed. Will they collapse again? So when you talk about Austin's question, can Ole Miss make the playoffs? If they went out, yes, they can make the playoffs. Will they win out? Probably not. That would be extremely tough. I mean, because they would have to beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. That would be very difficult. And they've got some tough games. Like you said, they have to play A&M, before the season's done. It's not going to be easy for Ole Miss. But, yes, if they went out, I do believe that the Rebels would make the playoffs. With only one loss, winning the SEC, they would get in. But it would be very tough for them to do that. Gangster Squids is still waiting for you to wear that Ole Miss hat. Keep it up. If I get an Ole Miss hat, Gangster Squid, I will wear an Ole Miss hat. I just don't have one. I really don't. I've got a few other teams, but I do not have an Ole Miss hat. But if I get an Ole Miss hat, I will wear an Ole Miss hat. The dream is not dead. It could happen. But I do appreciate you being here, Gangster Squid. He says, keep it up. Really appreciate it. Tim is in the building as well.
Damn.
Go Fighting Kiffins, he says. The Fighting Kiss will drop a game. I agree. I think they will. They're not going to win out. It will be very tough for them to win out. But I think this top 10 is pretty good. I mean, you look at it objectively from the top. Ohio State, it makes sense with the resume. Georgia, Michigan, I mean, they've been really good. Michigan's been the most dominant, but Georgia has some better wins, and it's Georgia. Florida State, Washington, I get. And I think 6 through 10, I think they nailed it. I don't really disagree with any one of these rankings here. All 5 of these teams are ranked right where they should be based off everything that we've dissected and discussed. So I'm definitely happy with that. To move on now to the teams that are still alive for the playoffs. I think this is where you're getting to the cutoff line, though, Jackson. When you talk about teams that can make the playoffs, I think Penn State can still make it. If they went out with one loss and things can break their way, it'd be hard, but they could still sneak in, probably. Missouri, if they could somehow win out, which would be insane if they beat Georgia next week, but you never know. You never know. I think they could get in. Louisville, if they went out, that'd be hard. I don't know because the ACC's weaker, but with a win over Florida State in the ACC title game, one loss. I mean, the loss would be to Pitt. That's not great, but I would say Louisville's when you're starting to say that probably not. I would say Louisville has a long shot if they won out. More than likely, they would not make it. There would be too many variables that they'd have to jump. But I think the cutoff line's Mizzou. Louisville being the very last. But I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I think definitely that the top 12 is the cutoff right now.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at Penn State. All they have to do is win out. They're good to go. Missouri, I'm surprised that they're ranked at 12th, honestly. But I do think one game that has helped them is that Kansas State game in week 3. And I'll be honest, that's my underrated game of the year so far, Missouri, Kansas State. Because remember when I said Tulane, Kansas State was my underrated game of the year last year? Well, Missouri, Kansas State is my game of the year so far this year, my underrated game of the year, because of that 61-yard field goal game winner. I mean, you think it was George Blanda that kicked it right there, or Adam Vinatieri.
I mean, it's insane. The record in the SEC, that no one has kicked that long of a field goal in the entirety of the SEC's history. That is wild. And I think that every year from now on, Jackson, you're going to have to find an underrated game that involves Kansas State. 2 years in a row, it's involved Kansas State. We got to keep the streak going next year. 2024 cannot disappoint. Got to have Kansas State an underrated game.
Well, there's one thing that needs to happen. Chris Kleiman has to stay at Kansas State.
Oh, yeah. That has to stay. Yeah. Kind of like with Oregon State. They need Jonathan Smith to stay. A lot of these teams, it is determined that they have to keep these coaches. Lance Leipold at Kansas, they leave. It would just really hurt the programs for sure. Now, Steven says Penn State should be in the top 10. Do you agree with that, Jackson? That's close because to me, the only team that they could be ahead of would be Ole Miss. They can't be ahead of Oklahoma. They can't be ahead of Alabama. They can't be ahead of Texas. So to be in the top 10, they would have to be ahead of Ole Miss. I could see it, but what do you think?
I think Ole Miss has a better resume than Penn State. Sorry to say that to Penn State, but it's like we're saying here tonight. Penn State's got to earn their way. I mean, they'll beat Maryland because Maryland's the Syracuse of the Big Ten, no doubt, because Maryland's forgotten to play football since that Ohio State game. Michigan, I mean, it could happen. They could upset Michigan. Who knows? And with Missouri, I'm looking at the rest of their schedule. I can't find a good win. Well, they almost beat LSU. Don't let that final score fool you. South Carolina has just been pitiful. And Kentucky, I mean, they let that Florida win get to their head. I swear, Kentucky. I agree.
It's crazy when you talk about Maryland. I mean, remember the dream that they're the fourth best team in the Big Ten behind the big three, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, and that collapsed after their last two losses to Illinois and Northwestern. So, yeah, that hurts for sure. So you would think Penn State would be able to win. But like you said, Penn State just doesn't have a lot of on the resume. They don't have a lot of good wins there. Missouri, I mean, what if Missouri did beat LSU? What if they won that game and they were undefeated? Where do you think that the Tigers would be if they were undefeated?
They would be at least in the top 8. They would be in the top 8 entering Georgia this week. That's what would be happening.
That would be so wild if Missouri was like legitimately in the college football playoff discussion. And they're on the fringes. Now, that's all going to end if they lose to Georgia, obviously. But they're on the fringes of it. Like I said, right now, before anything happens, before any more football is played with these teams, anyway, there's football on right now. Action's going on, but they're not in the college football playoff discussion. But of all these top teams, Missouri's in the conversation. That's more than can be said for most Missouri teams. Good job for Eli Drinkowitz saving his job. But, man, if they were undefeated, that would be wild. It'd be so cool to see Missouri in the top 10, top 8.
It's like we're back in the Gary Pinkel days in Columbia, Missouri. I mean, everybody talks about how great he was in the SEC East days, but people forget that he was doing very magnificent in the Big 12 North days.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I miss when, those teams were in the old conference like Missouri and the Big 12 and, A&M and stuff. It's crazy how all of it's changed. Now you got USC going to the Big 10, so it's all just exploded with realignment and everything. But you got Louisville at number 13, the final one-loss team of this stretch before we get to the two-loss teams. Do you think if Louisville wins out, they have a shot? Like I said, I think the cutoff's at Missouri. If they went out, I just don't really think Louisville has a great chance if they went out to make the playoff. But do you think there's any shot?
I think if they win out and basically just dominate Florida State in the ACC title game, I could see them having a shot at getting it. I mean, one thing that really helps is that Notre Dame win. And if Notre Dame finishes the season at 10-2, which, let's be honest, they got a great shot at doing that. So,
Clemson.
Yeah, because Clemson's pitiful. I mean, that's the worst Clemson team I've seen since 2010. I mean, oh man, what is happening with Clemson? Which that's another discussion for another day.
Got to use the portal, Davo. Got to use the portal.
I mean, you can't be the grumpy old man and go, "Oh, these kids these days." You can't do that. I mean, you got to adjust, man. Learn from history.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you look at Alabama. They were playing, running style of offense with Eddie Lacy, T.J. Yeldon, Derrick Henry. It was all that they did, and they had average QBs, Blake Sims, A.J. McCarron, Jake Coker. They never had the elite quarterback that was top 10, picking the NFL draft. It was average quarterbacks, fantastic defense, and a fantastic run game. But then Lane Kiffin, turned it around. He turned the offense around. Alabama modernized the offense. That's what you got to do. And now with Clemson, you got to be able to use the portal like everyone else is doing. That's why Florida State is more talent. And I see Tim. He's saying, "Get off my lawn, Jackson, you rascal kids." I mean, definitely. We don't know. We have not watched as much football as you, Tim. You got a lot on us for sure watching football, but I think we know a little bit. We know a thing or two. I mean, hey, Jackson's throwing out George Blanda, have his 1954 football card, laughing out loud as Troy. And then Gixer Squid says, "I've been praising Missouri all year as the under-the-radar team." Definitely, they've been under the radar, but if they beat Georgia, they won't be under the radar anymore. So I'm looking forward to that game. I hope it's competitive. Obviously, think Georgia should win as long as they play well, but that's going to be a good game, hopefully, if Missouri shows up.
I'll be honest. I'm just impressed with, CBS having, the SEC Big Ten triple header. I knew we were going to see some weights where there's, an SEC game and a Big Ten game on CBS. I just didn't think we'd be seeing Ohio State, Rutgers, Missouri, Georgia, and Alabama, LSU as the triple header on CBS. I'm just like, mind is blown, especially Rutgers being on CBS.
Yeah, it's better than that doubleheader that you had in week 1 where it was Rutgers, Northwestern, and Oregon State, San Jose State on CBS. It's like, what kind of doubleheader is that, man? I know it was on Sunday, for the week 1.
No complaints from me.
That was terrible.
More college football for us, the better.
For sure. But, yeah, I'm with you, though. Louisville, it would take a lot. They'd have to dominate everybody, and a lot of things would have to break their way. But, for sure, that would be tough for them to get there.
Louisville is in that battle for second place with Virginia Tech still. I'm impressed with what Virginia Tech's done this season. I mean, they were dead in the water after they lost to Purdue, Rutgers, and Marshall, but then they turn it around with a victory against Pitt, and then they're turning it around last Thursday, which I commented on the channel last week, and I was like, I wonder if Virginia Tech still has that Thursday night magic at Lane Stadium. Well, they answered my question. So they were they got out that belt and just, took Syracuse to the woodshed. Syracuse acted bad.
They're not what they were under Frank Beamer, but they're getting better. That's good to see. Definitely good to see. The voice of college football is here. Hey, boys, great job. Really appreciate it for being here, Mark. Great show that you had. I saw a bit of it. I was trying to, to do some Halloween activities as well. Happy Halloween, everybody, as well. But you had a great show going on, Mark. But appreciate you for being here. Definitely, it's getting crunch time in college football when the playoff rankings are back around. And in a couple hours on the East Coast, we're going to be flipping the calendar to November. We're going to find out if Ole Miss can win in November. We're going to find out if Arizona has a quarterback that can play in November. And that Noah Fafita is not Khalil Tate, Mr. October. So it's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to
Oh,
the
man,
rest of college football.
Fafita. Do not underestimate Fafita, man. I mean, do not turn – when there's Arizona football late at night, do yourselves a favor. Do not turn that game off. Don't. Just don't. Because when you do, you're going to be waking up in Sunday morning, you're like, what? Arizona pull off an upset and I missed it? Yup. You missed
Yeah, it's funny with the late games, though, because when I was younger and the late games would be on, and it's like, I really want to see him, but I got to go to bed, when you're younger and everything. So you go to bed, and then you wake up the next morning, you're like, oh, man, they actually won. They got the upset. Now it's like I'm staying up and I'm watching these games, and, boy, it's awesome. I'm like, wow, they did it. But, man, that next morning, you're not feeling so good because you stayed up till 2 a.m. watching the game. So I don't know what's better or worse, but still, I think watching the game is still a bit better. But definitely, now we're getting to the teams that probably don't have a shot at all whatsoever to make the college football playoff because they have 2 losses: LSU, Notre Dame, Oregon State. The only team that could get interesting if they won out is LSU. If they dominated everybody, won the SEC, if they get a win over Alabama and a win over Georgia in the SEC championship game, LSU would move up. I don't think they would have any chance, but they could get in the conversation. If LSU wins out and they can beat Alabama and beat Georgia in the SEC championship game, where do you think LSU will be ranked at the end of the season, more than likely?
Well, if LSU was to win out, including having a shot at the SEC title, they definitely be on the cusp of the top 4. And if they win the SEC title, then they're in. But I think somebody like Texas would get in over them if Texas is still at 1 loss. But we're looking at the rest of LSU's schedule. They got to go to Bama. That's their last road game of the year. They got Florida, Georgia State, Texas A&M to finish the season. Now, they always have an easy time beating Texas A&M in Baton Rouge. I mean, I don't think that's going to be a problem there. Florida,
College Station last year, though.
Yeah, that's just how it rolls. If it's in Baton Rouge, bet your money on LSU to win. But if it's in College Station, just bet on Texas A&M. I just wonder if next year it'll be on rivalry week, but that's neither here nor there. But LSU, if they were in the SEC title, honestly, I don't think they'd win it because knowing Brian Kelly, they always fall apart in the big postseason moments. They won't fall apart in the big regular season moments, but they fall apart in the big postseason moments. Now, if LSU beats Alabama, here's what we're looking at. And if Ole Miss beats Texas A&M, this is what we're looking at. Ole Miss, Alabama, and LSU are tied for first in conference play. So that's going to be quite a cluster. Imagine if they're 7-1 at the end of the regular season. That's going to be a conundrum right there.
Oh yeah, and we love to see it. I mean, because it's going to make things interesting and wild to see what's going to occur in the tiebreakers and all that. But yeah, LSU, I'm with you. I think of all the 2-loss teams, they have the shot. Because if you remember a few years back, I think it was the 2017 year. It was something like that. I might be wrong on the year, but Auburn. You remember they had 2 losses early in the season.
Auburn beat Alabama 2017, and then Alabama just kind of sat there and waited it out. They waited for Wisconsin to lose. They waited to see the result SEC title game. But I wish Auburn had won the SEC title that year so that Bama could get a shot at revenge in the postseason instead of waiting it out a year.
Oh, yeah. But when Auburn, though, lost in the SEC championship game, that's when they couldn't make it. Because they would have got in with 2 losses. They'd have been the only team that's gotten in with 2 losses because they lost early. And I feel like LSU, to an extent, has maybe lost early enough to have a shot. But to get those big wins over Alabama, Georgia, I think they could maybe get in the conversation again. But they're the only team. Notre Dame, I don't think they have a chance because they don't have a championship game to play, and they only have Clemson left. Notre Dame, there's no way they can get back in the conversation like LSU. There's just absolutely no way. I think 15 is a good spot for them, though, because they've had a good season. but definitely they're not in the playoff conversation at all.
But on the bright side, Notre Dame still has a shot at a New Year's Six Bowl. If they win out, they're good to go. But Clemson, they don't have a say in anything except going to a bowl game, but they may have a shot at playing spoiler. Not saying they will, saying they could. Stanford, maybe history repeats for Stanford. Who knows? But Oregon State, they have more of a shot at the playoffs. Well, Notre Dame won't have a shot at the playoffs. I mean, they got more of a chance at drinking a beer with Miss Kitty at the Long Branch Saloon than they do at the playoffs.
Yeah, that's a good one, man. That's a good one. But Oregon State, I think that their chances are way less than LSU. But if they won out, I mean, they could probably get to like 7, possibly or 6. I think they'd fall a bit short of having a legitimate shot to make the playoff. Like LSU would still have one, maybe. But yeah, Oregon State's still having a good year though.
Well, I mean, like if you look at the Pac-12 standings, all Oregon State has to do is win out, and they still have a shot at going to the Pac-12 title. So that's the thing. I mean, Washington and Oregon in the final 2 weeks, I will say you better pull for Washington and Oregon. It's kind of like tasting a bitter pill, but you're going to have to. I mean, I don't think you're going to have problems beating Colorado or Stanford. I mean, I know you're upset about losing to Arizona, but you got to shake it off. Shake it off, boys.
Yeah, definitely. Can't let it linger. And to Austin's point here, he says, do you think if Notre Dame was in a conference, would they have a shot? The problem with that is that Notre Dame's aligned with the ACC, a lot of the time. So if they were in the ACC, then they would not have a shot because there's not enough good teams for them to play. If they were in the Big Ten and they had just say Notre Dame had Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan to end the season. Think about it, if that was the case and they won all 3 of those games, yeah, they would shoot up the rankings and maybe they'd have a shot. So if Notre Dame was in the Big Ten, Austin, I would say maybe. If they were in the ACC, no. So, but since they're not in a conference, they don't have a chance at all. But definitely, it depends on which conference that they're in. Tim, he's confident in USC. He says they're going to rain on Washington's parade. I can't wait for that game. It stinks that game and the LSU-Bama game are on at the same time, but I'll definitely be flipping the channels.
Well, I mean, because all you got to do is have a laptop and have the CBS Sports app running. All you got to do is have the TV on for USC Washington. Make sure you got an iPad or computer or a phone and watch Alabama LSU on the CBS Sports app. So I wish ESPN did that with their apps, but that's neither here nor there. But if Notre Dame had something like Oregon State schedule, maybe. But USC raining on Washington's parade, well, that could happen. I mean, the Pac-12 is known to screw itself out of the playoffs like they have in the last few years. I hope they don't do that this year because I would like to see them have a playoff team, but I guess we'll wait and see. We're looking at Tennessee, Utah, UCLA, and USC at 17 through 20.
And none of these teams have a shot at the playoff. Unfortunately, if any of them went out, there isn't a chance. Utah blew that last week when they lost to Oregon. Tennessee, there's just not enough there. They haven't been impressive enough. And I just don't think, even if they could win out, there's not a chance. UCLA and USC definitely don't have a chance. I mean, USC almost gave everything away. Almost losing to Cal. If they had lost to Cal, would Caleb Williams and the USC Trojans have been able to get off the mat and win another game? Because they have to play Washington, they have to play Oregon, and then UCLA. Would they have just folded? I don't know if they would have or not, but they had to beat Cal. They got it done, but definitely priority number 1 for the Trojans if they want to be a playoff team in the future. And I mean, it'll be easier for them to do it with a 12-team playoff, but to be a legitimate title contender, a team that people think could win it all, you got to get better on defense. Your offense is good, but your defense isn't there. Just like North Carolina's. That's why North Carolina's out of, the top 25 now. Their defense blew it. So, but none of these
they
teams
lost
have
to
a
Georgia
shot at
Tech,
all.
Virginia. So I mean that's gonna hurt you. And
yeah.
But I did when I watched USC California the final score, and I looked at the score minute by minute, hour by hour, and I'm like, Did Aaron Rodgers miraculously recover from his Achilles injury and have his Bill Murray Space Jam moment? Like that's what I'm wondering, because I feel like he did, but then I was like, oh wait, Aaron Rodgers, his college eligibility's up.
Yeah. The Bill Murray Space Jam scenes are just fantastic, man. He's getting his shot playing basketball. It's awesome. But yeah, Aaron Rodgers. That's hilarious. Aaron Rodgers, if he was suiting up for Cal, that would be unbelievable. But yeah, as time has passed in college, Cal isn't what they used to be at all. But I mean, everybody's putting up points on USC, so they got to get better on defense. But it does stink that none of these teams have a shot at the playoffs. It is what it is, but they're all having good years, and they deserve to be in the top 20, I would think. USC is the only team I could see being a bit lower. I don't know if you agree with that based on the way they've looked, especially on defense.
Well, UCLA's non-con schedule is pitiful, so I mean, I'm surprised about USC being lower than UCLA. But I will say about USC, they could catch Washington napping. I mean, it's at USC, but if it were in Seattle, that'd still be a toss-up.
Oh, for sure. Will, thank you for stopping by. He says, hey, guys, I don't understand how Tennessee is ranked, especially at 17. Well, I know why they're ranked. I mean, they're in the SEC. I get it. I do. The Kentucky win was good. It was a good win. I mean, on the road, pretty tough environment. Kentucky's not a terrible team. That wasn't, like necessarily a game you'd say it's not a good resume building win. But I mean, I know what you mean, Will, but I don't think that none of these teams are necessarily, it's unfair that they're ranked. I could see Tennessee and USC being lower, but I think they all should be ranked because, I mean, you look at who's behind them. You get to these teams. These are the final 5 teams in the top 25. You've got Kansas, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Tulane, and Air Force to round out the top 25. And I mean, who do you put ahead of Tennessee out of this group or USC?
I'm putting Oklahoma State ahead of Tennessee, and because I mean, I get it. Oklahoma State got smacked by South Alabama, and they lost Iowa State, but they've gotten a lot better since. I mean, the thing that amazed me was that Kansas is ahead of Oklahoma State. I mean, I get Kansas had that big win over Oklahoma, but are you not going to recognize the fact that Oklahoma State has that head-to-head win over Kansas, and they got the head-to-head win over Kansas State? I do love that the committee had Oklahoma State ahead of Kansas State. I just having some questions about Kansas being ahead of Oklahoma State, but Kansas will have to go to Ames, Iowa for a battle against Iowa State. That will be pretty big right there. Oklahoma State, they had that last edition of the Bedlam against Oklahoma, which honestly, I'm still mad that game day didn't go there. I mean, this is a Bama fan saying it. I mean, game day can go to Bama LSU any old year. You got the last edition of the Bedlam. Show some respect, game day. And that goes for you too, Big Noon Kickoff. I mean, I know you're mesmerized by Kansas State, Texas, and that's a big conference game for the Big 12. But so is the last edition of the Oklahoma State game for the time being. Now, personally, if I were the Oklahoma legislator, I'd be like, hey, Oklahoma State, follow me. Hey, listen, you're going to get in a room by yourselves, and you're going to work this out, and you're going to play each other every year. Now, when I come back, you're playing each other every year.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I feel like if Oklahoma was undefeated, though, and Oklahoma State did not have that loss to South Alabama, it would have been the game that game day went to for sure. I think Oklahoma losing, and then the fact that Oklahoma State, they're not ranked either in the AP poll, which is insane. I don't know why they're not ranked in the AP poll.
To the
they're not even ranked. They're 26th, but they're ranked here. They're the only team that's not ranked in the AP poll that's ranked in the CFP ranking. So that's wild in itself. I'm with you in a way on the Kansas, shocking that they're over Oklahoma State, but it's because they beat Oklahoma and because Oklahoma State is the worst loss to South Alabama. But the head-to-head does matter. It stinks that Oklahoma State lost to South Alabama like that, though, because ever since they got the quarterback situation figured out, they've not been the same team. They've gotten it together. They were just bad early on because they didn't know who should be their QB. They were, had some growing pains, but they fixed all that. But
Yeah.
we'll see if Kansas and Oklahoma State, like you said, belong in the top 20. Really, Kansas State for that matter. All these teams are playing big games. All three teams could lose. Kansas could lose to Iowa State, Oklahoma State could lose to Oklahoma, and Kansas State could lose to Texas. So they'll all probably be out of the poll if they lose. Maybe if Oklahoma State or Kansas State loses close, they could stay, but probably not. They probably would fall out. But yeah, all the three teams, we're gonna see how they perform next week and whether they're still in the rankings. Tulane Air Force, you got Group of Five love. The Green Wave have had a good year, but without Tajay Spears, they're not as good as they were last year. But with Michael Pratt, they're still a good team. Air Force, they're higher in the AP poll than they are here. I get it's because Air Force doesn't really have that many big wins, but I'm glad that they're both here. But which team do you think has the best shot, Jackson, to make the Cotton Bowl? To be the Group of Five representative. Tulane, Air Force, maybe James Madison. Who do you think for right now?
Unfortunately, James Madison doesn't have a say because
I forgot. My bad. Sorry, I forgot. I totally messed up there. James Madison, they're not eligible. That's my bad. They should be. The reason why that I messed that up is because I've said it in my head a million times. They should be able to play in a bowl. It's insane that you let a team go from the FCS to the FBS and they can't make it. That is insane. It's not accurate at all whatsoever. Sorry about that. But between Tulane and Air Force and any other team, who you got?
That's a good one because I'm looking at Tulane's schedule, and they got a pitiful East Carolina team, a pitiful Tulsa team, mediocre Florida Atlantic team, a Texas San Antonio team that's been decimated by injuries all over the place. And then I look at Air Force. Right now, they're first in the Mount West, but they got Army. Army's been known to play spoiler from time to time, although Army's been kind of a disaster this season at 2-6. They got to go to Hawaii, but I mean, this isn't Colt Brennan, June Jones, Hawaii, unfortunately. Rest in peace to Colt Brennan.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
And then they got UNLV at Colorado, at Air Force. So, I mean, that looks like to be a good win. And then on Black Friday, on rivalry week, they got to go to Boise State. So, memo to me, flip between Arkansas, Missouri, Boise State Air Force, and that Amazon Prime game, Jets Dolphins. Boise State, unfortunately, is the toughest out of all because it's at Boise. Now, if they were at Air Force, they'd be blowing a 20-point lead. So, I mean, you can't be doing that with 4 minutes left in the game. And I'm gonna just shove it down their throats until they quit blowing that 20-point lead with 4 minutes left in the game. You don't do that. But I digress.
So you think Tulane or Air Force is a better chance based off, who they got left? And probably Tulane is the team that more people would think higher of because of the fact that they're a bigger, team.
Right.
But yeah.
I think for right now, Tulane's got that better shot because of the fact that they're still kind of riding high from that Cotton Bowl win over USC last year. And that's gained people's respect as well as it should. Air Force, they don't have a harder strength of schedule. Tulane has had that, so that's where they get in. And unfortunately, I'm sad to say Liberty's not going to have a shot at a New Year's Six Bowl. I mean, they're going to go unbeaten with the schedule they got. I mean,
yeah, there's just not enough, meat on the schedule, though. What are your thoughts on James Madison, though? Not being able to play again. Don't know why I said that. I know that.
Well, it's because
what do you think about it? Do you think it's fair? Because the rule is insane. But what do you think about the rule?
Well, because of that rule that they're in their second and final year of the FCS to FBS transition rule, where you can't go to a bowl game. You can't go to a conference title game. It's stupid. NCAA's got to change that rule. I mean, they're sitting there thinking about whether they need to change the overtime rules, something that everyone enjoys. But they're not changing the rule like the FCS to FBS transition rule. They're not changing that rule. That's actually something useful that you could do, NCAA.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, James Madison's a good football team, and I don't know if they'll go undefeated. They got a tough game at Georgia State this week, but still, it's wrong that you have a team that transitions over. I mean, they're playing good. They're 8-0. They're undefeated.
Curt Cincinnati's been an amazing head coach for James Madison. I mean, he's been winning at the FCS level, and he's been winning at the FBS level in their first 2 years at the Sun Belt. I mean, if I were looking for a head coach, Curt Cincinnati's one of my guys.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I definitely, he's going to move up if he wants to, for sure. He's done a great job there. I mean, and they are a quality football team that, like I said, the rule, it doesn't make any sense. It should be abolished. But Tulane, Air Force.
Yeah.
It a bowl game, but they're definitely in the conversation, but Tulane and Air Force would be ahead. Tim's got an interesting question. He says, when heck freezes over and USC beats Washington, Oregon, UCLA, then Washington again, where would they be ranked?
That's a good question. I would say 7th because unfortunately it would be the Pac-12 playing itself out of a playoff bid once again. And that's what would be happening. That is, I hate to admit that, but that's how it goes.
Yeah, sorry about that. My internet died for a sec, but
yeah, you got frozen for a little bit.
Yeah, I can't stand when it does it. Hopefully, it doesn't mess up again.
I'm unfrozen.
But yeah, I'm with you though. The USC can't get in the playoff, even if they won out and did all that. Tim, it'd be impressive if they did, but there's no way that they can get back into the playoff conversation. I mean, they just. I mean, the close win against Arizona, and then, I mean, the losses they've suffered. I mean, there's just no way that they can get it done. I don't think that winning those 4 games can get them back in the top 4.
I got to say, I'm surprised Arizona's not in the top 25. I mean, they've had a great game with everybody this season, with Mississippi State, with Washington, with USC, Oregon State, and basically just shellacking Washington State. And let's go back up to UCLA for a moment. I mean, their best win was exposing Washington State. I'm thinking, holy crap, UCLA's got a defense. They smacked Cam Ward around. Wow.
Yeah, you talk about UCLA, beating Washington State. Now that Washington State's falling apart, it does make that win not as impressive, though, unfortunately.
Oh, man, it's just terrible, but oh, well.
To go back to your point that you said Arizona you feel would have a shot to be ranked, what are other teams that you feel that have an argument to be ranked that are not?
Well, Arizona is one of my teams. James Madison is one of my arguments, but that's yours and I's argument, let's be real. Liberty, I know that their strength of schedule is pitiful, but let's put them in the top 25. I mean, I'm impressed with the job Jamie Chadwell has done. I'm surprised this man is not in a Power 5 job, but I guess we'll wait and see. Somebody needs to call him up big time. And Coastal Carolina's just been pitiful without him. Yeah, it's just there's another team. If Iowa State beats Kansas this Saturday, I don't see why they couldn't be in. I mean, they've done an amazing job this season. I mean, going from 2-3 to just winning 3 straight. And they're in a 5-way tie for first place in the Big 12. And if they beat Kansas, they knock Kansas out of conference play for the conference title game. And they still got to say in the conference title. Impressive job in Ames, Iowa by Matt Campbell. Another impressive job by Mr. Campbell himself. And I know everybody was throwing the baby out with the bathwater going, oh, Matt Campbell is horrible. He needs to get fired. He gonna find to go to Ames, Iowa. Nobody. You were lucky to get Matt Campbell when you got him. I mean, nobody's going to want to go coach in Ames, Iowa. Not even the right-hand man of Ohio State or Alabama or Notre Dame. They're just going to be like, Where's my bus? Did I get drugged or something? Good grief. I really
People,
got hung.
people are saying the same thing about Drinkwitz, at Missouri before he turned it around. I mean, there's a lot of coaches that people think that, they should be fired and then they get it fixed. Matt Campbell's done a good job. Maybe Dave Aranda, Sam Pittman, some of those guys can get it fixed as well. Who knows? But you are right. I'm actually very impressed with what Matt Campbell's done. I was not expecting him to have a good year, especially after they lost to Ohio. That's like Oklahoma State loses to South Alabama. Iowa State lost to Ohio, and then they lost to Iowa, but they've turned it around since. Been playing much better football. So, yeah, they definitely have an argument. There's a lot of teams that do.
Yeah.
But for sure, there's been a lot of interesting discussion with these teams. But if you guys in the chat would like to call in and, chat for a few, probably won't go, live forever, not until like past midnight or anything, but, talk for a few about the rankings, get your guys' thoughts and questions you want to ask and what you guys feel. I'm sure there's a lot more discussion to talk about because with the CFP rankings, these are the ones that matter. The AP polls out the door. It just doesn't matter anymore. We've gone 1 through 25. We agree with a lot of it. I really like 6 through 10, that range. I really like what they did there. There's a few that I don't understand. Will definitely was not happy with Tennessee at 17. Ohio State at 1, we get it, but it's a bit questionable. But overall, I think they did a solid job. It's not perfect, and no rules are perfect, hence James Madison not being able to make a bowl. Insanity. But college football, the playoff rankings, I think they did a pretty good job. I'm fairly happy with it overall. You fairly happy with the rankings overall?
I am at the moment.
Mm-hmm. What do you think's the worst ranking out of the top 25 teams? What's the ranking that I would say not that it's awful because like we just said that they did pretty good, but what's like the worst ranking you think?
Well, I love that Oklahoma State is in the top 25, but I don't think they should be below Kansas. But I understand why, because of the fact that Kansas has that big win over Oklahoma, so that's played a huge part in it. But let's not forget, committee, Oklahoma State has that head-to-head win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Will's would probably be Tennessee at 17 for sure. I don't know what other teams he didn't like, but he definitely wasn't a fan of that.
But I was surprised about Missouri being at 12, but I understood why. I mean, that big win over Kansas State is a huge reason why. So, I mean, beating the defending Big 12 champ, that's always going to be impressive. It's a very safe top 25, says the co-host of Trojans Conquest on Monday nights at USC football at the Voice College Football and co-host of the Pac-12 Chat Show on Wednesdays at the Voice College Football. But it's all very straightforward. Yes, it is, Tim. Yes,
yeah, I think that's like a great point that Tim just made. You talk about the rankings. I don't really think there's any team ranked in a spot where it's like it doesn't make sense. I mean, there's arguments to be made, like you mentioned with Oklahoma State and the Kansas State where they were placed, but for the most part, none of them don't make sense overall. They can be explained, and that's what makes it. I wouldn't. Safe is a good term, but I would just say just overall predictable. It was kind of predictable for me because I predicted in my head that Ohio State would be number 1. In my mind, I wanted Georgia to be, but Ohio State, I predicted in my head that they would be number 1 because of resume. And I think overall, like, I would not have got 1 through 25 exactly as the committee did in my head, but all of the rankings make pretty much sense. Steven says 1 Ohio State, 2 Florida State, 3 Washington, 4 Georgia, 5 Oregon. I guess that's his ranking, and I definitely could see that because you don't have Michigan in the top 5. And being an Ohio State fan, Steven, that's definitely a biased ranking.
Ooh, Tim's got a great question for us. Where will Oklahoma be ranked when they lose Bedlam this weekend? Still in the top 15, I would say, or like at 16, 17, I'd say.
I would probably say like 15, especially if they lose by like 7 to 10. If they get blown out, they'd fall a little further. If it's like a 1-point loss, maybe like 14, probably around 15. I think that, especially because they would lose 2 in a row. If you want to call in, Tim, and talk about the rankings, you definitely can because you're still in chat. Appreciate you for being here. If you just want to hang out and chat, don't blame you. But yeah, it's a good ranking overall. It's not perfect, but I mean, I've seen rankings in the past. I can't really remember what year, but there's been a few rankings where, I've been like, why is this the way it is? I don't know if you remember, but you probably do. But the TCU year and Baylor and Ohio State that year when I was younger,
2014.
that year still sticks out to me because you had TCU and Baylor ranked ahead of Ohio State, and then they jumped them. Ohio State jumped both of them. And people were upset. Ohio State's the brand. TCU and Baylor's not, but you remember that.
Well, yeah, but I think the reason why Ohio State jumped to 4 was not only because the Ohio State's a blue blood in college football, but because they were without their starting quarterback that year. They won with their backup QB, but then when their backup QB got hurt against Michigan, third stringer Cardell Jones stepped up to the plate against Wisconsin in a 59-0 victory in the Big Ten title game. So I think that helped plenty for the Ohio State Buckeyes. And they basically showed their worth. We have with us as Trojan Conquest co-host Tim Prangley and Pat Toll Chat show host Tim Prangley. And we have Sean Garner. What's up, gents?
How you doing, boys?
I'm not going to miss a chance to talk to you guys, the top guys in college football.
I appreciate you guys for being here. It's going to be awesome.
So what do you think of the top 25 so far, gents?
Nice and safe.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's just nice. If you look at it, it's just pretty much straightforward. There's still games against each other head-to-heads that they can sort this thing out. So I think that they said, look, we're just going to go right down the list, put all the undefeated teams on the top, put all the one-loss teams in the middle, and we'll fill in the 2-loss teams at the end. And that's really what they did, knowing that, Ohio State and Michigan are going to decide that one. Oregon, Washington kind of already handle it, but they'll definitely handle it probably in the championship game. So it's all, I think you guys will. I think Florida State's the one that has the easiest path to get in right now.
Yeah, the FBI had him at like a 65% chance to make the playoffs, so they're banking on him winning out.
Yeah, that makes
I'm
sense.
just wondering if Miami's going to have their little Jekyll and Hyde moment. I'm just wondering about that because that's the thing with Cristobal. They always play up to their opponents and play down to their opponents.
Well, we've seen Florida State be vulnerable in some of these games. I mean, if Riley Leonard doesn't go out of the game against them, and that's a totally different situation. And I mean, they lost to what looked like, not one of the top 100 teams almost lost to one of the not one of the top 100 teams in the country. And BC.
That Boston College game was abysmal.
Yeah.
That was abysmal. I mean, the Clemson victory is looking worse and worse by the minute, unfortunately.
They should have lost. I mean, if it wasn't for the fumbles, the scoop and score, I believe Clemson would have won that game. And the kicker, it's like all Clemson needed was a competent kicker, and the kicker missed.
Yeah, that's not looking too bright either. But they also have no margin for error at all.
Yeah.
You imagine they're going to have like a solid opponent at least in the ACC championship game. So they're not good enough to just throw their helmets in the middle of the field and say we win. They're just. But no, I mean, I don't know if anybody really has pole position here. Ohio State is in pretty good shape if there's some chaos in some of the other leagues to still get in possibly with a loss at Michigan, especially if that's like a classic type of game.
Sean, I'll be honest.
Ohio State got in last year getting blitzed by Michigan with one loss.
I'm kind of tired of people saying they got blitzed. That final margin was not.
I know, but still.
But yeah, I know. But what had to happen last year? You had to have, the champions in multiple. You had to have a bunch of these leagues play themselves out. You had to have, no one loss teams in the ACC or Pac-12. And
Sean, I'll be honest with you. I think if we see Ohio State, Michigan 11-0 going into rivalry week, and let's say we see Michigan win a tight one or Ohio State win a tight one, both of them are getting in irregardless. Because I mean, everybody's going to be like, "Oh, we want to see a Ohio State Michigan rematch again. We want to see something like that."
well, I would say I think if the SEC, ACC, if the SEC, ACC, Pac-12, and Big 12, if there's 3 one-loss teams among those, I don't think they're going to put in a non-conference Big Ten conference champion. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't say it's for sure, but they both might get in. If there's a little bit of chaos in the last few weeks, and there typically is. So
the weird scenario would be if you had Alabama win out and then beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. So they're in because they only have one loss and they won the SEC. Georgia has one loss because they won out and only lost to Bama. And then the Ohio State-Michigan game, the loser has one loss. So obviously the winner's going to be in. And then you have Texas win out, and then you have a one-loss Pac-12 champion. That would just be insane. So then you would have like 4 teams vying for the 2 spots. And like you said, that's where the loser of the Ohio State Michigan game might not get in if that happened. Now, obviously, odds of that are not great because probably Alabama could lose a game or whatever. Big 12 might not even be in the picture, but that would be wild if that happened.
Oh, what happens if Oregon wins out and Washington wins out, and then Oregon beats Washington in the championship game, and you got a 1-loss Washington and a 1-loss Oregon?
Oregon gets in.
Oregon,
Why?
the winner of that game gets in because they won the conference championship.
And the kicker is the kicker, and Washington loses on a last-second missed field goal. There you go. Now I got to add that in.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I think they're still going to put Oregon in that scenario.
Yeah,
and it all depends. It all depends on who's ahead.
Which is why the weight they put so much weight on a conference championship game, not on the entire season. It kind of and it's just like why I hate rematches. Period in the playoffs, because so let's say that whatever Ohio State and Michigan had faced each other in the finals, and Ohio State beats Michigan in the final, and they're 1-1 on the season, and you hand Ohio State the national champion. Why? Because they won the second game. I mean, that's why these rematches are just a waste of time. Unless you're going to play a third game, it's a waste of time to have. If you go 1-1 against a team during the season and you have the identical record and they hand the championship to the other guy because they won the second game, I think that's just horse shit. Sorry, gentlemen.
But Tim, you realize college football is the only sport where that argument even where that makes any sense, because
I'm trying to cling on to what we used to have, where the regular season, just like every other sport. You know what's great? Actually, we think about American, but what I like about the Premiership in England is you just get points during the regular season. There is no damn playoff. Whoever ends the table with the most points at the end of the year wins it. Not some just game, some little tournament at the end of the year, which invalidates the 12 to 13 games you played before it. And if you win this game, oh no, you're the champion. I don't care what you did. I don't care that our team pasted you, in the regular season. We're going to give you the championship because you know what? You won this magical game. That makes you the better team. I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Well,
I don't like the argument anyway when someone says that you're a better team just because you won. I mean, if Notre Dame beat Ohio State, it doesn't make Notre Dame better than Ohio State. They just won the game. I mean, that narrative's
right.
I mean, I'm pretty sure Notre Dame's a better team than Louisville. I'll hold on to it for sure. But I mean, they lost by 20 when they played. I mean, it would take a lot more to convince me that Louisville is a better team than Notre Dame.
Oklahoma State's a better team than South Alabama, but South Alabama beat them 33-7.
You're talking to a fan that really wish we could play that Notre Dame game again because we gave them 20. We handed them 21 points.
Definitely.
I think USC playing Notre Dame on a neutral field would be a hell of a game. because their offense is not that great and our defense is horrible.
Honestly, Tim, I hope we get to see a USC Notre Dame matchup in a New Year's Six Bowl this year. That would be fantastic if we did.
USC is not going to be in New York Six this year. They're not, but
Hey, Tim,
that would be cool
I've
to
been
see.
saying it all year.
The Pac-12 has like horrible bowl tie-ins too, right? Because what's like the next bowl after the Rose Bowl that they are connected to? They usually have pretty.
I think it's Holiday Bowl is the second, isn't it?
Yeah, is that? I mean,
And then it goes
Alamo
and then it goes to Alamo Bowl and it just goes down the hell from really the Holiday after the Rose Bowl. All the bowl tie-ins are crap.
yeah.
Well, let me see. So, yeah, I hope we see a Notre Dame USC rematch in a bowl game this year. I really do, but I guess we will wait and see. But
I've been saying it all year, Tim, but I've been wanting so bad. You know, it's never going to happen. Obviously, you can't do it, but it'd be so cool if you had USC's offense on Iowa's team, right? For all Iowa fans, and then for you to have Iowa's defense play on your team. It would be so great. I mean, USC would be so good. I mean, I know the people have said it before, but I thought about it like a year and a half ago. Like,
well, I thought Ohio State had something like that in 2019, where you could have made the off. They were one of the 2 or 3 best offenses in the country, and maybe the best defense that season. And yeah, that team rocked and rolled, and unfortunately had some weird stuff happen in that Clemson game in the semifinals. And I think Ohio State was definitely a better team than Clemson that year. But
I agree.
Weird things can happen in a one-game scenario. But pardon me. Man, I'm starting to get a cold here. We had snow today, gentlemen. I know you guys.
Yeah, I saw a little bit of snow on Steve Helwick's Twitter, and I'm like, oh man, they're having
it's
snow
still in the 70s where I'm at.
Yeah, I know you guys. I know you guys are all in nice sunny.
It dipped to the low 80s this week here in California. And I think there's a little bit of clouds in the morning, a little bit of marine haze in the morning. But
you know the funny thing is, 3 weeks ago we were in the 90s. Well,
that's weird.
Yeah, and now we've got snow.
That quick temperature change always gets you.
I did want to address the point Tim made, and it's an interesting one about the entire season being rewarded, the entire season mattering more. There's a difference between like merit and entertainment. There's huge entertainment value in these tournaments. And it kind of makes the regular season more meaningful for the second tier teams because they still have something to play for. You know, back in the old before the baseball playoffs got expanded, 3 months into the season, half the league had nothing whatsoever to play for the rest of the season, right? And it's probably I ought to talk to my brother. He's a huge EPL fan. I don't follow it myself, but there's in this era of television and ratings, you're going to want you're going to want those high leverage, high volatility moments. Those game where one game really matters. Mm-hmm. It means everything. So, if you were deciding everything by merit, you would just have a bunch of games and have some sort of structure and system, and whoever was the best over that course, they're the champions. They win. They've demonstrated themselves to be the better team. But America has spoken, and they like playoffs. Mm-hmm. They like.
Hang on a minute. Mm-hmm. You said America has spoken, and they like playoffs. What I will say to you is they didn't have a choice.
Well, does anyone pay much attention to college basketball until March Madness?
I watch it all year.
I do.
Maybe I'm not normal like most people, but I love watching it all year.
But the ratings for those regular season games aren't great, and then for 2 weeks of the season, it dominates the headline.
But it's had a tournament,
millions and millions of eyeballs.
But it's had a tournament for the majority of its television career. The national. There's been a tournament in basketball forever. My point is, and I remember if you lost the game, you're done. It's almost like a knockout. If there's a lot of great Alabama, USC teams Notre Dame teams that had definitely the best team in the country, and they go up to like somewhere and they lose a game. That's it. I mean, that about college football was unique. The more and more we make it like the NFL, I'm telling you, is to get to a point where it's so much like the NFL, but it's an inferior product.
I agree.
And so if you start following this model, well, you know this is what the other sports do. Yeah, but they're not college football. What made college football special were the bowl games. The networks, Fox and especially ESPN, got greedy. Said, how can we get as much money as well? I know. Let's have a playoff. Hey, now let's expand the playoff. Let's not stop. Let's go all the way to 12. Let's go to 16 teams eventually. And it's diluted. Once you get to 16 teams, you're going to have guys sitting out during the regular season.
Yeah.
And save them for the playoffs. It's going to change the sport more than you guys realize.
It's so bad. I'm with you. I mean, obviously you explain it so well, way better than I could. But I mean, I've been saying it for years, talking with people. I didn't like the playoff. I liked it better when you had when I was a little kid and it was the BCS, because it wasn't perfect. Like I remember the last year that you had the BCS, Alabama in the kick 6 game. It was so upsetting Alabama couldn't make the championship game when they lost to Auburn, but that's the way that it was. And more teams, if you won, you got in. If you didn't, you didn't. And now you have the playoff. And it's like when Jake Butt got injured for Michigan, the tight end, and he lost his spot like in the draft, went from like the second or first round to the 6th round. Other players were like, we got to not play because we're not in the big thing on our draft. It's like it just messed it all up. The bowl game.
Jalen Smith played what I guess would have been the more extreme example is Jalen Smith, who completely destroyed his knee and his leg in a bowl game. He would have been a top 5 pick in that draft. Fell to the second round, and really he never was the same player in the NFL that he was in college.
And thus, afterwards, we saw players sitting out the Sun Bowl and the Citrus Bowl, like Leonard Fournette and Christian McCaffrey, and that's where it's all gone from there.
I mean, it stinks. I understand why they opt out, and I'm glad that they get to be top picks because they don't get hurt, and that it helps with their careers and everything. But it stinks because football was better when I was younger and I could turn on these bowl games and everyone's playing and these games matter. And even though you're not in the big game, it still mattered. Now no one cares. And like to Tim's point, you're adding more of these teams, to make the playoff. And it's just some of these bowl games aren't going to matter at all anymore. I mean, like the only games that are fun are watching the little schools play because they want to be there. I mean, if Indiana made a bowl game, they'd care, but they don't ever make a bowl.
Well, we know Rutgers will definitely care this season. They'll be like, yay, we're in a bowl game.
Well, that's where you have a problem when you have a team, I don't say like a Tulane, that hasn't been in a Cotton Bowl in God knows how many years, going up against a team that thought they were going to be in the playoffs, and you have a motivation issue. Oh, and then you have no defensive coordinator. But that's a whole different story. Speaking of defensive coordinators, since we have this little intimate circle right now, who would you guys? If you're the AD at USC, right, and you get the pick, you're defensive coordinator. Let me give you a list, and if you want to add someone to it, but if you had a choice from Jim Leonard, Gary Patterson, and then fill in your own blank, or a guy from the NFL, what would you do? And then think about a defense. Think about a USC team with an offense that we're going to have, and then a defense that's elite.
Okay, one name that we actually kind of touched on, we mentioned his team a few moments ago. What about
Phil
Jeff
Parker?
Hafley?
We're getting Phil Parker? Oh, no. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
What about Jeff Hafley? He will probably not survive the season at Boston College. I'm guessing he'll be.
The funny thing about that is they're 5-3, and I've laughed at this with Will.
Oh yeah, they barely beat UConn.
They're a bad football team, but their schedule is so ridiculously easy. They could go 8-4, and then people are going to say Jeff Hafley saved his job. They're horrible. They're a terrible team.
They barely beat UConn and Holy Cross.
They did, and they lost to Northern Illinois. If they had to beat Northern Illinois, they could have gone 9-3.
All right, hold on. We're talking about head coaches that might get fired. How about Dave Aranda?
He'll get a vote of confidence.
put it in like my pitch for Jeff Hafley. In the one season he was at Ohio State, like I mentioned, that 2019 season.
Mm-hmm.
That Louisville
top 2 or 3 defense in the country. And if you look at what Ohio State was the year before, when we had your current guy, and what they were the next few years under Kerry Combs, I mean, yeah, you can say that's Ohio State, but we weren't good defensively for 3 or 4 years. We were terrible for 3 or 4.
I'm no fan of Grinch, but I mean, A, he was a code defense coordinator. B, they brought him in for 1 year. There's not much you really can do as a code coordinator for half a year, for one season.
Well, what about Hafley though? That 1 year, the Ohio State, he was there.
That's because Grinch. Hey, it's easy because Grinch set the table for him. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm trying to say is I got this argument. I had to argue this, that. I'm saying literally any top 30 defensive coordinator, and I'm pretty certain we're gonna get a top 30 coordinator, is gonna be enough for us to be able to compete heavily within the Big Ten.
To answer your question, I think I would go Leonard. I would offer Leonard.
I think Leonard's going to be the DC. But I was going to say about Lincoln Riley. Now, I know there's been naysayers that have said Lincoln Riley doesn't make changes when needed. That's where they're wrong, because I remember watching the 2018 Red River rivalry, and when Stoops, his brother, had to go, Lincoln Riley's like, okay, Mr. Stoops, I know that you're my mentor's brother, but you're not cutting the mustard as DC. You got to go. And he did. Things worked out for Oklahoma that year. They beat Texas in a rematch in the Big 12 title. Bam. Although it didn't work out in the playoffs, but that's neither here nor there. Lincoln Riley is known to make changes when needed. And he's definitely doing so at the DC position. He's going to be like, hey, we got to change this. We got to do this.
I was shocked he brought Alex Grinch over. I didn't think he was going to go from Oklahoma to USC. I still don't know why he did.
Here's why I think I don't know, but here's the only thing I can think of was the fact that it was last minute. You got to realize he was hired in December. Mm-hmm. And you had to find a deal as a coordinator. And I'm a lot of people, especially USC fans that want to just make everything simple, go, oh no, he's his friend. So it didn't work that way. I bet you they looked around, saw what was available, and said, shit, let's just roll the dice on Grinch. Because that's the only reason I can think they kept him. And once they kept him, they couldn't fire him after 1 year, because that would, go 11-3, and although the defense was terrible, he had an excuse last year because, again, you guys, I don't know how much USC football you watched when we were 4-8 and the laughing stock in college football.
That team should have been 7-5 or 8-4, but they quit. That Cal game, they weren't even playing.
I would say it would have probably been like, I would agree. It'd be like a 7-5 team. 8-4 would be a stretch, but it's more likely a 7-5, 6-6 team if Helton had stayed. But even then, that's because of the offense. The defense was I watched, and again, this is before we knew how good Oregon State was getting and how good their line was and really what they were doing up there. But they ran the ball on USC like they were 95 Nebraska, just right and left, and then right down our throat, and then right and then left, and slammed right down our throat for the entire game and kicked our ass. That defense was the worst defense I've ever seen at USC.
Yeah, so I remember
Grinch's performance at Oklahoma honestly was not that bad. They were like bottom 10 in the country defensively. The year before.
I remember
the year before, and they had like middle of the road, like top 70, top 60 defense.
Yeah,
when he was there.
Yeah, I was gonna say Jonathan Smith and Oregon State, they're pretty scary. I mean, it's a good thing that they aren't on USC's schedule this year because they gave USC a great game 2022 and 2021. They went Cujo all over them in LA.
But Jackson, I'm gonna take but we're gonna throw 21 out because that was a nightmare. That was a rudderless ship when they played us. By then, we were in. Right. We had Dante Williams as the as a head coach. It was a mess. But I'll take. Listen, I know they're good, but I'm gonna play them. Today and twice on Sunday or having to go to Autzen and play that Oregon team is a steamroller right now. I would take. The Beavers are good, but they're not the Ducks. The Ducks are about. This is as good as I've seen the Ducks in a long time. on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
Well, Jeffrey, we got a comment from Mr. Troy V, and he says what USC really needs is their own Connor Stallions. Wow.
That's a good comment. I gotta answer this though. Jason says Boston College isn't going 8-4, and there's a good chance that that's not possible. But you look at the schedule, and they've got Syracuse, Virginia Tech, and Pittsburgh. Not crazy that they could. I would still say they lose another game than that, but it's not crazy.
I'm looking at Boston College schedule, and they could go 9-3. It's all right if I show it for a little bit.
Oh, go ahead.
Will, let's see your outfit.
Oh, well, I changed out. I mean, I can
God
get
dang
it
it,
back
Will.
on.
By the way, when you were leaving, I was telling you to wait because we were gonna put you on.
Oh, my bad.
So I have with me is exhibit the little evidence of Boston College's schedule. So Friday night they go to Syracuse.
That's a dog show, man. Like that.
Look at that schedule.
Oh,
It's
man.
terrible.
Win, loss.
Can you scroll up here a little bit? I want to see like who they've played. 'Cause, like some of these are.
It's bad.
This is absurd. Like they beat Army by 3.
Yeah, but
Army is.
have you watched Army from the last few years under Jeff Halfley?
Or,
Hey, they beat Holy Cross by 3 as well. Don't cut them short on that too.
True.
and
I think
they got
Where you-
destroyed by Louisville.
They beat Virginia
Well,
by 3.
that Louisville game looks like it was a big reality check for Boston College. It basically
Their
sent a
best
reality
wins,
check.
Georgia Tech on the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll beat Syracuse. I mean, I don't think Syracuse is intimidating anybody. They've forgotten how to play
Syracuse
football.
looks like they've quit on Dino.
Dano's gone.
Yeah, he's not in good shape at all up there. I mean, outside of the Dungy year, it's been very bad for the most part.
And
No,
They
but
got
I think
Virginia
Boston
Tech.
College could lose all of these games too.
Well,
they're bad enough. I trust them. I have
Yeah,
faith
they
in
could. I
them.
mean, they could still go 5-7. It's just the fact they could go 8-4 blows my mind. And if they did, people would think they're good.
The fact
Well,
that they're likely going to make a bowl game, and they beat Army by 3 and Holy Cross by 3 and UConn by 7, and they're going to go to a bowl game. I mean, you want to talk about diminishing the season, the regular season? This is Exhibit A. I mean, this is terrible.
yeah, I mean,
They are
Pittsburgh looks a little scary at home, obviously, but that
It
Miami
doesn't
game.
look scary. I'm sorry, man. I watched them play, and they were bad.
Troy V.
Yeah, but you're
We
talking
see
about
wins
Pitt
out.
on the road. We're talking about Pitt at home.
Hey, Cincinnati went into Pitt and dominated them.
Well, I got a question about the post-game show. All right, let's see what we got.
I will say that Miami Boston College
Oh,
Black
God.
Friday game. I mean, I do like that they're paying respect to the Doug Flutie Hail Mary pass. I mean, I do love that.
That's an iconic play.
Cut by Boston College. I don't believe it. That's a touchdown. I'll never forget that moment. Like watching it on YouTube and watching it on like those classic VHS tapes. Man, I got so much great memories of it.
But you're not old enough to have the Flutie Flicks, are you?
I had like
I was
a
a little kid. I remember the Flutie Flakes, the commercial. His son had like, what was it, cystic fibrosis or something like that.
Something, yeah.
It was some charity drive or something they made that for. Yeah.
Something like that, yep.
Yeah.
Listen, gentlemen, I got to get out of here. I just want to pop in and say hi.
All right, man.
For coming
Tim,
on.
thank
That
you for
was
coming
awesome.
on. For those who are just tuning in and they don't know about Tim Pringley, check him out at Trojan's Conquest. He is the co-host with Matt Zemek, the writer and editor of Trojan's Wire, and they talk with Mark Rogers about the latest in USC football Monday nights. And you can also check out Tim Pringley Wednesday nights on the Pac-12 Chat Show on The Voice of College Football. Check him out. He's one of the best there is, man.
Tim, I want to get one last your opinion on one last thing. Have you seen the photos of the Central Michigan sidelines? The Stallions.
You know what? To be honest with you, like when it comes to these things, I wait till all comes out because you know what I mean. I just for now it's going to be interesting, but I mean the NCAA, in my opinion, is a paper tiger and toothless.
Yeah,
you know, it's been declawed.
This is what the NCAA.
So, I mean,
I think what they got to do, the NCAA, if they could do this, they got to just fire everyone, all the coaches and like the leadership of the football program, and just start from scratch. But not punish the players, just punish them with like losing some scholarships, but fire the whole staff.
You mean Michigan?
We're a long way from deciding what the punishments should be. I mean, there's still kind of
I haven't even talked about none of that because there's just so much still out there that we got to figure out, and they'll get it. You know,
honestly, when the Michigan investigation is complete, then I'll comment. I've stayed away from commenting on it on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, everything, because it's
my
like
YouTube
I don't know
and my Twitter is devoid of Michigan football talk right now.
I mean, like that whole picture of him, was it not him on the Central sidelines? I mean, this is just the wildest turn in the story yet. I mean, this is getting into like, I don't know, made for TV movie.
What I love though is how Ohio State fans, you know, you and a lot of other people, just like some of them, they're like just waiting to see what happens. Other people are like already Michigan, they're not going to make the playoff. We're automatically going to be in. It's so awesome though. It's hilarious.
Yeah, and you know the shoe would be exactly on the other foot if this was an Ohio State fans. The same people, the same people that are like going to the mat defending Michigan would be all over Ohio State, and all these mouth breathers at Ohio State that are saying they deserve the death penalty or something like that. You know, so they would be people looking up, spending all days reading the bylaws and interpreting them for us on not talking about anyone in particular. Yeah.
Well, I gotta say that Michigan's getting a taste of. But it's kind of weird, and why I don't think anything will happen to them, because nothing really does ever happen to the Big Ten or the SEC,
except Indiana basketball in 2007.
Okay, but listen, I'm talking about if just like even Alabama got nailed when their stuff was really egregious. I mean, there's certain things you cannot sweep under the rug.
Well, Penn State, you can't say Penn State didn't get nailed. Penn State got hammered.
If it's really egregious, you have children being raped and you know about it. That's what I mean was too far. You need
all
to
Indiana's was Tim in basketball was a couple phone calls to players that were already committed, which is legal today by Kelvin Sampson, who's now at Houston. That was all it was, and Indiana got axed for 4 years.
I loved it when you were looking at like the old Big Ten Network telecasts and showing all the Penn State people react to the penalties, and they were like, "Oh my goodness, they couldn't believe it." I'm like, "Bro, they're like all defending Joe Pa and saying it wasn't that bad." It's pretty funny.
I mean, like, I just those people at those board of trustees meetings when they decided to fire Paterno, all of those, you had thousands of people protesting it. I'm like, you need to get a life. You need to get a hold of reality here. I mean, if you think
I remember there's that HBO movie of Joe Paterno, and I'll be honest, I mean, I like Al Pacino, but they should have gone with Joe Pesci for that one. I mean, Joe Pesci looks and sounds like Joe Paterno. I mean, he's perfect.
Is Jason O still in the chat? I don't know if he is or not. Plug your ears if you are, but what Miami did and how they were just completely, I don't know how the hocus pocus that shit worked. After all the Devin Shapiro stuff, that literally was such egregious recruiting violations.
I could be totally wrong.
I remember the Devin Shapiro extensions. Who was speaking? Go ahead.
I'm just saying that the capriciousness of how they dole this stuff out. I mean, you look at the guy whose literally program was absolutely gutted because the Pac-12. The worst is the Pac-12 teams absolutely were excited when USC got gutted because they were getting crushed by USC for decades, And if you look at what USC actually did, and I do believe Reggie Bush got money, but he didn't get a lot. You guys, the whole idea about the house, all that stuff, he didn't get any more than most Heisman Trophy winners have gotten at the very least. The problem is if you're winning like USC was winning, they're going to take you down. And Michigan, the way Michigan's starting to win, there's people that are taking them down. Because I think a lot of the stuff on Michigan is, one, things that all the teams do. They really do.
Ohio State's been winning at this level, though, for a very long time. I know they got hit a little bit with the tattoo gate. I don't know.
You know how I miss, but you know how I mess with Mark, right, all the time, right? I'm the one. He says it now. Ohio State has a very, and it's true. You guys have a very high floor, but you don't have the ceiling like an Alabama or USC has. Maybe
not, just because of where we're located.
Well, I mean, for whatever reason, yeah. I'm not saying there's reason this, reason that. Mm-hmm. I'm saying is when like in Alabama does what they've done, reinvented dominance over the past couple of 15 years or so, or when USC in the 70s or in the Pete Carroll years, when we decide to go on a run, we really go on a hell of a run, And I mean, think about it. Think about the Pete Carroll teams. If there was, if they got a mulligan, if there was a look at all the times that Alabama's lost a game and got to play still for a national championship. What if those USC Carroll teams, like in 2008, in 2006, 2002, 2003, sorry, not 2003, they won. If they get the mulligan, how many more national championships those teams would have had?
Oh man, they would have gotten more. I mean, I remember those Pete Carroll days as a little boy. Like when
I feel like Notre Dame has USC's floor and Ohio State's ceiling, but there's like they've been hired like incompetent coaches like Charlie Weiss and Ty.
You do not have Ohio State's floor. You do not have Ohio State's floor.
I said USC's floor, Ohio State's ceiling. Yeah.
Sorry, I got that wrong.
I have a feeling like because of the academic requirements, you don't really have as high of a ceiling as Ohio State.
I was going to say about the Miami scandal with Nevin Shapiro. I remember when reading about it and studying it years ago, the only person that didn't trust Nevin Shapiro at Miami was head coach Randy Shannon. And he was like, I do not trust this guy. I don't want him.
Randy Shannon, he was on the Miami teams where that stuff was more rampant.
Yeah. Like he was a starter. He was a starter in the Catholics versus Convicts game. He started for Miami in that game.
Yeah, yeah. And he was he was around that program forever from when he was a kid. I mean, he was he knew who the bad guys were. He
sniffed them out.
Yeah, he was like the missing member of Crockett and Tubbs.
Who did? Oh, sorry.
Said, go ahead. I was done.
No, I was saying, who did trust Nevin Shapiro and was cashing his checks?
Donna Shalala.
Paul D. That sound familiar to anybody?
Who?
I think so.
Paul D.
That name doesn't. No.
Yeah, he's the guy that was the head of the infractions committee that hammered USC. And you know what he said? One of his famous lines when they hammered USC? Because they couldn't really prove anything, but shit was going down. I'm not going to pretend like it wasn't. But they never proved anything. You know how they got USC? And you go look stuff, you don't believe me. Go read the infractions report. It says USC knew or should have known. That's literally what he said. And here's the guy who was taking checks from Nevin Shapiro, and Miami got 0 sanctions. So
basically, it wasn't the self-imposed postseason bans of 2011, 2012 that helped Miami get off scot-free.
Well, but here's the thing, Jackson, right? If you get caught in the hotel room with a hooker, right? And you say, I'll tell you what, please, don't, you're red-handed. You're going, I did this here. I'm gonna, honey, I'll give you that new car you wanted, and I'll do a couple things. Like when you're caught red-handed, I'm tired of these things. Well, we self-imposed this stuff. We did this. It's because when these guys were self-reported as well. This is my favorite one. They self-reported. You know why they self-reported? Because they couldn't keep it under wraps. They knew it was a matter of time before it gets out. So then they self-reported.
Nevin Shapiro they got wind. Nevin Shapiro was talking to an SI reporter from his jail cell.
And there was FBI stuff. I mean, whenever it's wrapped together with also like a criminal prosecution, Miami was screwed. It was like, because you can't, the NCAA doesn't have police powers. They don't have subpoena powers. They can't, there is no, they can't go through the whole process of getting all that evidence, which they would have had bucket loads, right? Because the guy's got a federal case against him, and they're going to give him all the information they would have needed, where all his money went. Well, when it's all getting funneled to cocaine, hookers, and the University of Miami, it's kind of hard not to get out in front of that one, if you know what I mean, right?
Yeah. My other favorite one was the North Carolina scandal. They were actually just sort of making up degree programs.
Yeah, was it
where players would have to write like a one-page.
Oh, by the way, parody. It's a parody, by the way. It's a parody because they get sued. Just having some fun here. Har. Okay.
Yeah.
North Carolina got off scot-free. It's all over. I mean,
Tim, I'll be honest. That explains so much about the Miami stuff. I'm like,
well, Jason says Paul D was the Miami AD.
That's what I'm saying. He was.
That makes sense why that happened.
He was getting checks from Nevin Shapiro. Like there's pictures of Paul D and Nevin Shapiro shaking hands on the field, handing a big old big old Price is Right checks to him, saying whatever $25,000. That Paul D's and Paul D had the balls to say to USC, well, you either knew or you should have known. So lack of institutional control. And here's this guy doing what he's doing. It's just, again, if you're a USC fan, I know you guys aren't. I know everyone hates USC, but what they did to USC did not deserve. Period.
No. I've stuck up for you guys in that forever. I mean, and you're right. It is a completely capricious organization. There's no consistency to how they handle this thing, which is why who knows what's going to happen with Michigan. My feeling is they're going to get completely hammered because they've pissed off the NCAA.
Well, that's what you don't do.
Is that
and Tim, I always want USC to be good. Like I always, because like if USC, like with USC being bad with Kelly, like it set the bar much lower for Kelly for what he had to do.
True.
But it's raising the bar. Like Marcus could not go 0-2 versus SC. Like people would start to turn on Marcus. That's why it was like so important for him to get that win. But if USC what's up?
I mean, Kelly took advantage of USC. Forget the sanctions, right? Then USC self-sanctioned.
Kelly's first year was the first year of the sanctions, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, and then they Kiffin. So everyone badmouths Kiffin. I think Kiffin did an incredible job at USC during those sanctions.
Yeah,
USC
was terrible.
Was preseason number 1 when we were on sanctions. I mean,
didn't you go like 6-6 that year that you were? Or something?
No, they went 7-6. They lost to Georgia Tech, who was 6-7 going into the Sun Bowl because they were in the ACC title.
Not the year you got fired. I'm talking about previous to. I'm talking about 2011. And then
2011. I remember USC went 10-2. They spoiled Oregon's season that year. The national title.
2011.
The talent was insane.
That was a tough game that year, man.
Thank you for spoiling Oregon season that year.
That's what we like to do. Well, and they had a season there under sanctions. So they're this is the best part. This is the greatest moment. We only can have 15 scholarships, right? Guess who won the mythical recruiting championship that year? Lane Kiffin and his 15 recruits was the number 1 recruiting class in the country. That's so when people shit on Kiffin for that, the guy was an absolute stud. He was immature. He did some dumb stuff behind the scenes.
That's why everyone wanted him to fail, because he said stupid stuff.
He was quite arrogant. Hey,
he still does that.
Before he showed up at Bama, I was one of the Lane Kiffin naysayers, but over time, as he worked for Saban and then went on his journey of redemption, I was like, I wish I hadn't been so hateful on Kiffin when I was younger. I
Yeah,
mean,
Lane
I
Kiffin,
cringe at myself for
that was a
that.
bad situation at USC that it ended with. I
I
mean, he didn't
mean,
deserve that.
but I
well,
did love the Daniel Tosh parody. That was pretty cool.
I've never seen that. Well, I
Tosh
think it was
Comedy Central.
Kiffin
Go
sort of
ahead,
made
Tim.
him. He sort of became a villain because I think he became a poster child for nepotism. Getting. I mean, he ascended up the coaching ranks and got these these great jobs at such a young age.
Mhm.
But I will
he
argue
failed so miserably in the NFL.
I will argue with
became
you.
an
I will
target.
argue with you a couple of things. One,
You're not.
It
That's
wasn't-
not me saying this.
okay, I'm saying it's not nepotism when you're really effing good at what you do. And he was
I
a
agree.
great offensive coordinator. That's why he was
I agree.
getting all these opportunities. He grew up with Monty Kiffin, and they're probably drawing up plays at the kitchen at the dinner table when he was probably about 13 with his dad. So being the son of a coach is not a bad thing. This whole nepotism, not everyone's a Brian Ferentz. You know what I mean? It's Ferentz. It's not.
Yeah, it's
not-
only
not-
bad if you're not a good coach.
Yeah.
if you're not good at what you do. A lot of these guys, a lot of the greats. Look at Nick Saban, Lou Saban. I mean, these guys, they're from coach. Most of these guys, maybe their dads were high school coaches, right?
Lou Saban and Nick Saban aren't related.
They're not.
No.
How the hell could that not be?
No, they're not. No, Nick
What?
Saban.
Lou Holtz
Nick
and
Saban
Skip
grew up.
Holtz are.
Oh, they
Nick-
must.
Nick-
They're
Nick
not the
Saban's dad
West
was like a
Virginia
factory
Sabans.
worker or
They're from the
something.
Illinois Sabans. I get it. Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Really? I think someone
Yeah.
told that before.
No.
Fine. Okay. I'll get that. That would. Damn it. That would have been a really good example. I'll give you some other
No,
ones.
but I want to say, like, in addition to the nepotism,
Yeah, look
I
that
think people thought USC's talent was so great that he was kind of a turnkey coordinator. That might have been that's part of the perception is that he just networked his way into his positions and he didn't really earn it. And I think that's what people that was the perception. It's probably not true, but I feel like and he can be kind of smug and kind of arrogant and he carries himself with kind of a villainous air about him, and that is partially why so many people have rooted for him to fail. Why he's been in taking delight when he has failed.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. It all started when he was at Tennessee. Was there for 1 year, and they couldn't believe their minds when he got the opportunity to be a head coach at USC. And he left from Tennessee to go to USC to be a head coach. Just like the people in Oklahoma. Huh?
Tennessee's
So the
still
people in
mad about
Oklahoma
it because
can't
they
believe-
were throwing stuff at him last year.
Yeah, and then the people in Oklahoma couldn't believe that maybe someone would leave Oklahoma and go to USC. I mean, it's they don't realize that there's reasons. I mean, they're not for the same reasons, but it's not like Tennessee and USC are parallel. No, even as programs, Tennessee and USC are not parallel programs. They're
Tennessee
not.
fans think so.
Well, they can think all they want. I mean,
Tennessee's not even
Oklahoma's
parallel
got a
to
case.
Florida. Tennessee's not even parallel to Florida. What
I
makes
don't know
them
if you
think that?
saw this, Tim, but
Florida, I
Gary
don't know. I mean,
Danielson
Florida's
said
only
about
been good since Florida's only been good since Steve Spurrier took over. They're kind of a dead program. Before.
Gary Danielson said about a month ago that Tennessee's Neyland Stadium is not, I guess any more special than the other stadiums in the SEC that at the top. And I agree with it. I mean, you talk about Death Valley, you talk about the Swamp, you talk about Bryant Denny, all these, the 12th man, all those are about the same as Neyland. And Tennessee fans were upset at Gary Danielson. I got a couple comments for agreeing with him. Tennessee's great, but they're not like anything necessarily special compared to other programs, like with their stadium and like other things. You're talking about USC. There's a lot more that goes into it and being a great program. It's just not besides winning. There's a lot more goes into it. Tennessee's great, but they're not the top of the elite.
I mean, I would say they're a brand, but they aren't like a blue blood.
Yeah, they're a brand. They're just not top 5 in college football in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
No, it's a tough place. Tough place in the South. I mean, Tennessee, the state of Tennessee has way less talent than the states it's competing with. I mean, it took a really good coach to keep them relevant. As soon as Fulmer left, Fulmer left, I mean, that program's they've had a year here and there, but they've been very average.
Yeah, Fulmer
years.
faded late, and they haven't really recovered.
Right,
Like,
right. He wasn't the same the last few years. That's right.
Well, I was sitting at a Bosco game. I was sitting at a Bosco game 2 weeks ago against Mater Dei, and I'm sitting with my friend JJ who played at USC, and both Kiffin and Sarkisian were at the game, and they both walked up. I said, I don't get starstruck at all, really, but it was just weird to me. I'm sitting there, and here they are. There's Kiffin and his son, and Sarkisian. And they're sitting there talking, just like sitting there, like I'm watching a Bosco game. They're sitting right next to me, and I'm just sitting here like, dude, both these guys coached at USC, and now they're both gonna be SEC coaches, and they're sitting there and they're talking about. And so JJ asked if he's like, are you here to watch the talent? You guys recruiting guys? And Kiffin, only Kiffin could turn to, now he's got all these guys. They paid for him.
Oh man!
That's so awesome.
And that right there shows you why you go to USC.
Yeah.
because you can go to games where there's 6 or 7 guys that you're trying to recruit playing in that individual game.
The talent level at Bosco and Mater Dei is insane, you guys. There were probably at least 20 kids that not only get Division I offers, but they'll be starting on top, like, Power 5 schools from those two teams. It was insane. These linemen, I mean, I remember in high school, I remember what our linemen look like. You look at linemen now, especially these two schools, they look like they could play in the SEC right now. That kid Green, that's a tackle at Georgia, that guy was at Bosco's a couple of years ago, and he looks like a man-child already. So.
Yeah, but that's why with Ole Miss, you talk about Lane Kiffin. A lot of people thought that he might take the Auburn job or whatever because Ole Miss has a ceiling. They can only do so much. They can't. I mean, I know a lot of Ole Miss fans tell me that they have top 10 NIL operation, but they're not a top 10 program. They don't have a lot of the extra added benefits that other programs have. A lot of other things that they just can't achieve.
Like running water.
That's not what I meant, but
I've heard that's an issue there, but I live in Michigan, so I shouldn't say anything.
Yeah, no, you have no room to talk. No.
Yeah, that was a big thing a few years I remember. Steven says Big Ten Blue Bloods, Ohio State, Michigan, Nebraska, Penn State, USC. Nebraska's got to get going. Nebraska has to start winning.
I mean, Nebraska was great in the 90s. They were great through the late 60s to like the late 90s.
They're like Indiana basketball, but Indiana at least good in the 30s and 40s too.
Wait, why were you saying Penn State's a blue blood?
Not Penn State.
No, not Penn State either, really.
Penn State's like as borderline as it gets, I think. Nebraska. I mean, I'll say this about Nebraska. Their fans are there. Their fans.
Let me ask you, Will. Do you think Nebraska football is a bigger blue blood or Indiana basketball?
Oh,
I say IU.
Yes. There you go.
Nebraska football dominated in the 80s and 90s.
So did Indiana.
Yeah. I mean, Nebraska has more championships, but
Indiana's
been better over time.
I don't know.
Besides this sanction.
And your star players don't run over people with cars. There you go.
Oh man, that's funny.
It's actually not funny, but
no, it's funny the way you said it. It's
but
funny
it's
the
true.
way you said it. You've been making me laugh all night, Tim. You're hilarious.
What? You gotta laugh or you'll cry if you're in my shoes these days.
I mean, the college football playoff rankings, what the stream was about. We haven't even talked about it in like an hour. So, I mean, you guys got any more thoughts on the rankings, I guess, before we go?
Yeah, I do want to look at okay, so Missouri and Louisville here at 12 and 13. These are just I mean, they don't have much of a resume, really, do they? I mean, I don't think either of them are that good.
Missouri beat Kansas State and they beat Kentucky. I mean, they've got a couple of decent wins, but nothing too noteworthy. And Louisville only Notre Dame. I think Missouri's
Gosh,
better.
that was such a bad night.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, but the Notre Dame game was just that was a spot game. I mean, like Notre Dame had they had been through the ringer going into that. And I don't think nobody can watch that Notre Dame all year and tell me that team showed up that night.
Austin doesn't agree, though. He said this earlier tonight. He said, I'm so nervous, man. We're on the edge of greatness.
Well, you better be. I
line.
mean, with the way that Louisville basketball looked in their scrimmage, I would definitely go all in on the football this year.
Didn't they win like 3 or 4 games last year or something?
Yeah,
like
they lost to a D2 game last night in a scrimmage.
Oof.
No, State lost an exhibition game to Grand Valley State, who's a Division II team.
Oh my gosh!
And then, this was a while back. They made the Final Four they won the Big Ten and made the Final Four that season. So,
all right. So listen. So if you're a top 4 team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which one of the bottom 10 would you least want to face in a game?
Which one of the bottom 10 here?
So 50. Yeah. So let's add Notre Dame. Let's throw Notre Dame in there too.
Okay.
Let's do 15 through 25. Which team do you think can be the most dangerous? Put Notre Dame in because of their defense. Which team would you least want to face? Let's just say there was a play-in game. Which one of these would scare you the most?
Okay.
Because we're talking about expanding the playoffs, right? And so that's what I'm thinking in my head, like what an early round playoff game would be. Granted, 15 through 25 would not be involved, but I'm just humor me.
Oh, jeez. Let's see. God, I don't know.
Oregon, UCLA, Utah, and UCLA are pretty much the same team. All defense, no offense. USC is no defense, all offense.
I would not want to go.
Yeah, I think I would probably go with Kansas. I think they've got some juice offensively. I think they can really move the ball, and their defense isn't USC level bad. So I think I would
almost argue USC, and I know that's insane, but USC can score. USC can score. So
but those top 4 have really good offenses. Well, except Georgia, but they have a decent offense.
It's true. I don't know. It's tough. Notre Dame is probably one of the most complete teams of the bottom.
I could definitely see. I don't know, man. I could definitely see us beating Georgia, just because, especially if we start to bait their quarterback, and get those interceptions and get those short fields. I could see
the problem with a lot of these teams at the bottom, though, they're either really good on one side of the ball or the other. USC's elite offensively, terrible defensively. UCLA, Utah, Tennessee, and Oregon State all have struggled on offense at times this season, especially Utah with no Cam Rising, UCLA as well. Tennessee's had bad struggles. Oregon State has had moments, but Notre Dame is the team that can put up points, and they are good defensively. Like I said, they're probably the most complete team out of all of them at the bottom. And then when you get down here outside of USC, Tulane and Air Force, it'd be hard for them to beat the top 4. And these 3 teams are flawed. Kansas, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State. They're all flawed. They're good, but the Big 12 has been very inconsistent. They'd have to play a Lightning in the bottom.
They're flawed because that's why they're 15 through 25 because they're flawed.
Well, I know that, but they're also not as talented. You talk about from 15 to 25, who's the most talented team in that group? Probably Notre Dame and USC.
Yeah. But I will say the team I would not want to go up against is Oregon State. They are pretty scary, especially on the red zone.
Their defense isn't very good this year, though.
Yeah, their defense isn't as good as it's been in the past. See, the problem is that last year their defense was elite for the most part.
Yeah.
For the most part, and their offense wasn't as good. Their offense has gotten better this year, but their defense has gotten worse.
Well, their offense was good, but they had no quarterback.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying, but
right.
That's the point.
Their offensive line can just destroy you. They can eat you alive. Yeah. I was something about Air Force going this far. They changed the rules in college football that should have limited Air Force quite a bit with the this cut blocking rule. Are you guys aware of when they changed the rules? You can't cut block someone more than 3 yards down line of scrimmage right here, and that should limit a team like Air Force, and they've still managed to get going. Troy Calhoun, I wonder if he'll be a candidate for, or if he'd be interested in leaving.
I think part of it that helps Air Force too is that they can actually throw the football. Like you look at Navy and Army, they have not, been able to throw the ball at all lately last few years.
Yeah, I mean, they are both not good at all this year. And what will I say?
I just feel like the Air Force coaches stay there for 30 years and don't leave.
Yeah, Fisher DeBerry is in there. Yeah. So no, I don't know.
All right, I said I was leaving about an hour ago. I really do gotta go. I got work I gotta do.
All right, Tim.
All right, take
Happy
care.
Halloween.
Happy Halloween and fight on, Tim.
All right, guys. See you guys later. Thanks for having me on.
So,
how many teams? I guess a few more questions and discuss before we go. How many teams would you think, Sean, that would you consider to be in the top 25? Like you got like 2 or 3 teams that you feel have an argument to be ranked.
The argument to be ranked here, there aren't. I don't know. I mean, I think pretty far down you're picking hairs there. But I would. I mean. I guess not. None that were like egregious. I mean, I don't know. UCLA is in there, right? The Big Ten has like they've Iowa. I think maybe you could have somebody from the Big Ten West. It feels like there should be, but I mean, I'm someone in there. Yeah. I think Iowa maybe one of those teams. James Madison maybe.
James Madison
as a candidate. So yeah, I don't know though. I mean, there's not much. I mean, I can say the team I'm most shocked about, if you would have told me like 5-6 weeks ago, they're going to be in the initial college football rankings. Oklahoma State, my God.
I thought Mike Gundy was in trouble.
Are you talking about the bottom 25 teams in the country? And
I feel like Gundy was just using the non-conference games to test out his quarterbacks. He didn't really care if he won. That's what it seemed like.
Yeah, but that ended up hurting them because if they had to beat South Alabama, they'd be 7-1 right now, and have a lot more to play for.
I wish Gundy would stop having the easy non-con schedule, especially for future years.
I mean, they played Arizona State. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I know Arizona State was bad, but they didn't know that when they scheduled.
Yeah, when they scheduled Arizona State, it was a long time ago, and they were better back then. So I mean,
it's just that I wish Oklahoma State would have like 2 Power 5s on their non-con for future schedules, but I know they won't do that as long as they got Gundy. So I mean,
the thing is, when you play non-conference games, it's hard to play 2 Power 5 because then you're playing 11.
Yeah, most teams don't do that.
Yeah, but they should. They should be more like you.
Conference games, then it's easier to play 2. But when you're,
I don't care if it's 8 conference games, non-conference games. If you're a Power 5 team and you're looking to be in the playoffs, you should try to beef up your non-con schedule.
I think the issue is that Oklahoma State is never really in the conversation most years, and I mean they're a team that people are happy if they go 8-4 most of the time.
Well, they could now with the 12-team playoffs. I mean,
well, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, but I mean, like, you can understand why teams go the easy route. Like, think about a team like Purdue.
No,
they would have a real shot if they would have scheduled Indiana State, Ball State, and New Mexico for their non. They would have a real shot at getting into a bowl game still. Like, they would be viable.
Well, if you're trying to go to a bowl game, okay. But if you're trying to head to the playoffs, don't be scheduling those teams, or else you're out. I don't care if you're
so Michigan's just out no matter what now.
I'd punch him for that. I mean, that's how it goes. I mean, everybody's gonna get punched for that. I mean,
It could hurt them. It could hurt
Yeah,
them.
it was so funny.
They
I was
lose.
seeing people say since Michigan doesn't play anybody in the non-conference, that even when they go undefeated, they shouldn't get in. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, if they're going undefeated, they're gonna get in. I mean, if they have a loss,
well, I mean that
I get
UNLV win does make them look good. So I mean, okay, I'll make an exception. For
I
that.
was, yeah, I mean UNLV. Well, I mean, if you look at their schedule, they may have the worst schedule
Right.
in the entire country outside of that Michigan game. I mean, they have
But if
played
you still-
nobody
Right.
any good at all. They played a
But
lot
if
of
like
bottom 20 teams in the country. What?
true,
Yeah.
but if like UCLA was in a playoff hunt, I'd punch them for their non-con because I mean, Coastal
That's
Carolina.
Michigan's fault, though. They were supposed to be playing Michigan this year.
Yeah, but I mean,
Yeah, that's
I got punched you for San Diego State being horrible. I got punched you for Coastal Carolina being a disaster compared to
Coastal's
past
not
years.
horrible, but to your point, Jackson, they're a lot worse than they were with Jamie Chadwell. I mean, compared to that, they're still decent.
True.
Yeah,
But I will say, Sean, this year's UNLV team has been pretty impressive.
Oh yeah, Barry Odom's done a good job. It's always been amazing to me how they've consistently been as putrid as they have been. I mean, how hard should it be to recruit to Vegas?
No, especially not now. I mean,
Right.
Vegas is getting sports teams everywhere. Everybody's wanting to go to Vegas.
I mean, my thought process always would be like the worst thing about coaching there would be just keeping your players under control and just all the.
I mean, it's impossible. You just stay see the sights like on the outskirts of town. There's a lot of cool things to do out there. But yeah,
Oh yeah, I've made several trips. It's an easy place to make bad decisions.
for sure.
I've made a few of them. So
And don't worry, Sean. I also hold that rule to Bama as well. Play two tough non-con schedule, two tough non-con Power 5 games. You should be good to go. Which they're doing that starting in 2025. I'm loving that. So
Ohio State's non-conference next year is not too daunting either. Had to back out of the Washington home and home.
Well, because of Washington going to the Big
Yeah, what
Ten.
impeccable timing how that worked out.
Honestly, I was pretty mad at the time when Ohio State, Washington,
Got
canceled that home and home. Like, I'll be honest, I was super angry. But then I was like, okay, Washington's joining the Big Ten. That makes
We have
sense.
Texas, Michigan next year, right?
Yeah, yes, we do.
Yeah, that's gonna be on
Michigan,
Fox.
Michigan is getting buried for the last two seasons of non-conference. And if you think this year's non-conference was bad, you should look at the teams they played last year in the non-conference.
Oh yeah,
It was horrible.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, but Ohio State or Michigan normally have some kind of game in the non-conference.
Yeah,
they played Notre Dame forever. And then
I wish Michigan would have a tough Power 5 game and Notre Dame annually. That would really be fantastic right there.
Yeah,
I just want to see every one of the Power 5 teams that are looking to go to the playoffs have more of a tough schedule for future years. Now, I will give some leniency on schools like Indiana because, I mean, they're not doing so hot in college football thus far.
Yes, Indiana needs easier games. I mean, if they have two
Yeah.
tough non-conference games, they'll never make a bowl.
But if you're making bowl games and if you're playing for a shot at the playoffs every year, I will kind of boost the ante up a little.
Makes sense.
That
But
goes for
basketball is just better because you get rewarded for playing tough games. I mean, you can lose 10, 11 games and you get a 4 or 5 seed in the tournament if your schedule's really hard, you got a great resume and a lot of quad wins and everything. But in football, playing those tough non-power conference games, it doesn't help you out. If you lose them both, then you're done. You're already messed up. I mean, granted, with the 12-team playoff, you can in, but football has not given it, a reward. You're not rewarded for playing those games. It's almost better to play the easy games, and then
It is.
it just isn't worth it like basketball.
It definitely is. I mean, like, it can work to your favor because I think Ohio State got into the playoffs last year largely because they scheduled Notre Dame in the non-conference. I mean, but generally what matters more is just the numbers in the right column. The left column, just as long as that's 0 or 1 in the left column, or in the right column. I mean, it almost doesn't matter who you beat. Just don't lose games.
I mean, Cincinnati made the playoff because they went undefeated, and I know that they beat Notre Dame, but that was it. I mean, that was literally it. Everybody else that they played was not relevant. Indiana they beat, but Indiana had a bad season that year. So it was just like they got in because they were impressive and they had the win and everything else broke their way. Like if Oklahoma State, no one talks about this. I remember Oklahoma State Baylor. If Oklahoma State won that game, they would have gotten in with 1 loss. And Cincinnati would have been number 5. The only reason Cincinnati got in because every single team had 2 losses behind them. That's why they got in. But
that's
still, like you said, for the most part, Sean, all you have to do is go undefeated and you're good to go. No, it doesn't matter who you play.
Especially if you're in Power 5. Florida State wins out, they're in, guaranteed. Even though the ACC is a pile of poop.
Right.
Absolutely.
I still get mad that Oklahoma State had an easy peasy non-con in 2021. I'm just like, You want to be a playoff team? Gotta have a tough schedule. but I know that, it's like you say, Sean, in a way you're rewarded for having
it. They did go to the blue turf, Jackson.
Yeah, I know, but Boise State is not like the Chris Peterson Boise State, unfortunately.
Not even like the Brian Harsin Boise State this year. They're
Oh man, they're gonna be really thankful to go back to the Brian Harsin days. But I do wish they would convince Chris Peterson to come out of retirement. I mean, I know it won't happen, but I would love to see it happen.
Yeah, Boise. I was getting a little nervous with Boise, though. They were not doing so well, this season. But then they just floored Wyoming 32-7. So I have a little more restored faith in the Broncos. They're 4-4. They should make a bowl. I think they're like 3-1 in the Mountain West. I think maybe they're. I don't know. I think they're.
Yeah, they are.
They're 4-4.
So they're not horrible, but definitely not as good as they used to be.
Yeah, the Mountain West as a whole this year is just like really down. I think San Diego State sucks this year. They're normally a strong program.
Yeah, I'm not.
I mean, Wyoming had that win against Tech at least.
Yeah. That's
Wyoming's been fantastic. I love what Wyoming's done, but San Diego State, this is a candidate for the Pac we're talking here, and they fell apart this year. It was like a Martin Scorsese.
The Pac has no candidates though. The Pac's gone.
Yeah, now they don't. But
I know
when they were trying to piece when they were trying to stick it Frankenstein the thing together with
they waited too long. They should have made moves years ago. They could have done the inverse of what the Big 12 did to them. They could have done that.
The Big 12 was a complete wounded animal. I mean, people were dying. The marquee programs like Kansas and Oklahoma State, they were looking to get out, to jump ship and find new homes, and they just couldn't. I don't know. The Pac-12 with their media rights deal and everything just could never get it together, and then they waited too long, and as soon as Colorado jumped ship, I knew that the league's done.
It was history, and I mean the Pac-12 network, they never put it on. Like streaming services where people can watch it. I've never had the Pac-12 network in my life. And
I can't imagine. I can't imagine.
I actually have it. I actually have it here in Michigan. I don't know why.
I cannot imagine.
After this year, it won't matter because it's going to be non-existent.
I got to be honest. I can't imagine what it's like to be the Pac-12 network commentators. They're just like, this has been another game right here at the Pac-12 network, and it's like,
so they're just checking their LinkedIn between everyone. Oh, did I get any more offers here?
The perfect job for 2024.
Awesome.
And we got some comments from Hummus Hero. Hey everyone, what's up, Hummus Hero? And
appreciate
only talk
you being
sport.
Hummus.
And Jeffrey, you said thanks for being here, Stephen Cherry. And we say thank you to Stephen Cherry for being here. Thomas Harris said UNLV played Fresno and lost. And they most certainly did. Austin, Sports Talk with Austin says would love to see a Notre Dame Alabama series. You're going to see that in the late 2020s.
We
And
might
I'm
play
so
this year. You
excited
never
about
know.
it.
We might play this year.
Wait, what series is that? Alabama?
Notre Dame, Alabama.
That would be good.
Yeah.
And we
It could be
see
completely what if it completely flips? Like, what if Bama just falls apart after Saban leaves, and then Marcus Freeman becomes
Do you think that's going to happen, Will? Do you think
There's-
Alabama's going to collapse?
Wait.
I'll
No,
say
no.
this,
I think it's possible. I basically started following college football around 94, 95.
Well, that's when Notre Dame got bad.
And for that, first 12, 13 years that I was watching, Alabama was nothing special at all.
Yeah.
I agree.
I mean, they were completely just another name in the SEC. They had I think they had one good year where they beat Florida for the SEC championship, and otherwise just I heard stories. I know that they were a historic program, but I'm just like, they're the team. They're that one team that has the most boring uniforms of all time. And sorry, Jackson, but all
right.
They have numbers on their helmets and and then all
you'd have to do a lot more than get under my skin. So I mean,
well, when you're on the internet,
Al Shadow has an emoji of some sort. Is that a boar? Is that a cow? What
maybe
is that?
Razorbacks.
It looks pretty small. He looks pretty cool. I'll tell you what. Jason O says Fresno is pretty good. They
Fresno's
most certainly are.
Yeah, Fresno's not bad. Fresno's a good program. Their quarterback is really fun to watch. That Mikey Keene, who's at UCF. He's dynamic, moves around a lot, pretty dynamic.
And it's crazy with UCF. Their last few quarterbacks have all left. Mackenzie Milton obviously left when he got injured. He went to Florida State. And then you had Dylan Gabriel left and went to Oklahoma. And then Mikey Keene left and went to Fresno. Like, all their quarterbacks have left. And then John Rice Plumlee obviously came in, from Ole Miss. So it's crazy.
Yeah. They've had a couple of quarterbacks get taken pretty high in the draft over time. Dante Culpepper from there. Blake Bortles. From there,
and Blake Bortles, I remember that one year with the Jaguars when they were decent and they went in the
Oh
playoffs.
man, everybody threw the cart.
Man, they kind of got jobbed by the ref too. Against the Patriots, they kind of got jobbed.
Oh yeah, they got completely jobbed in that game.
No man, everybody was like, the Jaguars. I'm like, you're throwing the cart in before the horse, there, good buddy.
Well, I mean, they should have been in the Super Bowl, and they were horrible. Yeah, it was horrible for almost a decade before then, and then we're great that one year, and then we're just horrible for another 5 years immediately after.
And now they're good now.
Yeah.
Well, they're gonna be a team to watch in years to come with Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence. I mean, that's an amazing head coach quarterback duo right there.
I think Urban set the table for it. I think he deserves most of the credit. For it.
I'm honestly wondering if Urban Meyer's heading back to college because I mean he's got that big.
He could go
ego.
Here's my hot take. I think he goes to A&M when Jimbo gets fired because the talent's there.
A&M.
It's a similar situation to Florida, like with Ron Zook. Like Ron Zook got a talented team there. He was just a crappy coach. Jimbo's kind of doing
the
same
thing. That's
thing.
like the perfect fit. Urban and A&M. That's like the perfect fit.
The Michigan State slappies here are
they're trying to make it happen. They're like, maybe if we say it on Twitter that Urban Meyer's going to go to Michigan State, he'll go to Michigan State. That's
like when Indiana basketball fans are saying Brad Stevens to Indiana. Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
No, Brad Stevens is happy calling the shots.
I was like, they thought that Brad Stevens was going to go to Indiana. And he was getting the GM job at the Celtics. Like, I don't know. Saying it on Twitter doesn't make it so. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Brad Stevens. Indiana. I'm like, you didn't get tested.
Where is Brad? Is Brad Stevens still on the?
Yeah, he's at the Celtics. He's not a head coach though. So
That's
I think
okay.
He's in the
Yeah.
position Danny Ainge was.
yep.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I'd leave the executive position to go back to being head coach, but
No way. No way.
I mean,
no,
well,
I mean,
some
like,
of
why
them
would I
just-
get fired in Bloomington, Indiana for having a bad day because of a flu? Like, good grief.
I don't think Indiana's that bad. They gave Archie 4 years, and you
I
only
know.
won
I'm
it,
just
but-
messing with.
I
I'm
know, I
just
know.
messing with you.
that is weird how Indiana has just gone to be so average for so long. It's such a storied place. I mean, it's such so much tradition that supports the team so much.
Mhm.
I mean, you would, yeah. I don't understand. Yeah, they never, whenever they have a head coaching opening, they never seem to get like the big name, the Calipari.
Mhm.
You know, that's always somebody like an Archie Miller or
Kelvin Sampson was the guy, though, and then he
Yeah,
got in trouble.
he was.
If Kelvin Sampson did not get in trouble for what he did, which again is completely legal now, what he did, and he's doing it at Houston, and it's working out real well. If he had stayed in Indiana, I can guarantee Indiana would have been probably in one another title by now, because Indiana is better than Houston, and he's done what he's done at Houston, so he would have done even better at Indiana. They probably would have won a title. And Indiana would still be definitely in everybody's mind a blue blood program. They still are in my book, but Indiana's been bad because of that. They
Do you
needed
think
to have
that? I
left
think
Kelvin
it might
Sampson.
be a little easier to recruit to Houston, though. Do you
I don't
think?
know about
No,
that.
I don't
When
know.
Indiana was in its prime back in
Houston.
2007, still, Kelvin Sampson would have been able to get whoever he wanted.
Houston's like basically a commuter school. It's not a. It's
Well,
not.
it's like what I was thinking is like, would you rather live in Houston or Bloomington?
I've been to Houston twice. I'm good on Houston. I don't need to.
I mean,
I've
Thomas
been
Hero's
to
point,
Bloomington.
Tom Crean was a good name when they got him because he had success at Marquette with Dwayne Wade and everything, and he did have a few good years, but it wasn't consistent enough. And then Indiana fired him, and they were really bad under Archie. I mean, people forget actually how close Indiana was to being really good under Tom Crean. The year that they had Zeller and all that, if they didn't lose to Syracuse in the Sweet 16, that team could have been in the Final Four. Troy V saying Indiana's probably in 07. I'm saying that back in 07, people still thought of Indiana highly. That's what I meant. And Kelvin Sampson could have kept Indiana in their prime. Indiana was getting there. Eric Gordon, all that, he was getting good players for brief. And then it just all went down the twos when the NCAA destroyed them. And then they've been bad since. Mike Woodson's starting to turn them around, though, a little bit.
Yeah, Archie was really good at Dayton too.
Mm-hmm.
I thought you guys, that was a pretty good hire for you at the time. My parents were University of Dayton graduates, so I followed him pretty closely. And
yeah,
what do you think? What do you think of UD this year? Do you think they'll get over the hump?
I don't know their team that well this year, to be honest with you. I don't
still have Darren Holmes. That's about all I know.
Yeah, they're every year they're top 2 or 3 in the A10. And
they had the great year with Obi Toppin, and then they couldn't play in the tournament.
Oh, I know, that was so gross. I was watching almost every game that season.
They were so good. They were like going to be a 1 seed team. San Diego State was great that year too. They were like going to be like a 1 seed, but then they ended up obviously being a good last year. But that season hurt a lot of teams.
Oh my God! And like I knew with what they were losing the next season was going to be a massive rebuilding year. Mm-hmm. Like I know Xavier's built a really good, pretty consistent program. Like they can be a top 10
They
team.
always have a good coach.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And to me, it's. I feel like Dayton should be higher. I don't know.
I just don't think that Anthony Grant's that guy for them.
I don't know. I don't think he is that much either. But Dayton, if you look at like the athletic department,
it's pretty high
for every team, and like they're more than double the next closest team in the A10.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And they're and you know how the the play-in games every year are in Dayton.
Yeah, like Dayton has a big fan base for sure.
You know, it's amazing how they ended up getting it, because it was one year that they decided to expand the field to 65. I think one conference came in and they got an automatic bid, and they didn't want to lose in that large bid, so they just said, "Yeah, we're just gonna make it 65." And so they put the last two teams in. They had this play-in game, and Dayton was just happened to be one of the tournament sites that time, and they nearly sold out that game. Can you imagine any place, like, if the two worst teams in the tournament come to your city and they have no connection, no geographical connection to how many people are showing up to that game? Like 100? but they just said, "Oh my God, this place is dead. There's nothing to do here. We may as well just have it here every year, where there will never ever get more support for this game than we do here." So it's been, the play-in games have been in Dayton every single year. And interesting.
Yeah, Indiana made the play-in game one year. Mike Woods' first year 2 years ago, and there was a lot of Indiana fans there.
Dayton and Bloomington aren't that far apart. They're only like 2 hours.
Like Pitt had a lot of fans there for their play-in game.
Who did?
Pitt.
Yeah, I mean, Pitt's a little bit further away, but yeah. Now there are actual like name programs that have brands, since they're not all 16 seeded games. Mm-hmm. But so all right, guys, I'm about to check out for the night. It's always a pleasure.
Sounds great. It was a blast talking college football, college basketball, scandals, a bunch of stuff that wasn't even about the playoff rankings. We did touch on that too. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate you for coming on and chatting. It was a great time.
Take care. Where'd Jackson go to?
He said his internet died.
Okay. All right. Sure, I'll see you guys relatively soon. Take care, Will.
Sounds great.
See you, Sean.
So I guess it's just you and me, Will. I mean, we're about, I guess, ready to wrap it up. I mean, what are your thoughts on the playoff? Because I haven't really heard your thoughts on it.
I mean, I just don't understand. Like, Oklahoma beat Texas, but they're ranked below. I don't know. To me, that doesn't make sense. I mean, I know the Kansas result, but still, like, I think head-to-head should matter more.
I get it. I think it's just because Texas, beat Alabama, and then Kansas is a worse loss than Texas lost. But I know what you mean. The head-to-head should matter too.
I mean, I'm a little upset that Notre Dame's ranked below LSU, but I know obviously if Bama beats LSU, ND would pass them. And even if ND was ranked higher than LSU would pass ND if they beat Bama. So it'll work itself out.
Yeah, well, I mean, Notre Dame's not in a bad spot. It stinks they have 2 losses, so they're out of the playoff.
Bad night in Louisville, man. There's like, I was reading like one of the ND writers. Like, he said like they just didn't look like they were like had much energy that night. Even before the game, he was like, "Oh no, it's gonna be a bad night," and man, it was a bad night.
Yeah, they just did not have their mojo.
Okay, I'm back. There's a lot of wind over where I'm at. So we got a little problem there, Houston.
Yeah, I understand, man. I've had that happen before. Me and Will have gone live, and my internet just dies for like 2 minutes.
Yeah, I was about to say some off-color stuff at the weather. I'm just like,
yeah, the weather can stink. Hummus Hero says, just think next year Notre Dame would be on the edge of making the 12 team. For sure. I mean,
like as long as they beat A&M
like
and USC, I think they'll be able to make it. They have A&M, USC, and Florida State. Those are the 3 big games next year.
Man, I'm going to be looking forward to those games. Hummus Hero said teams like Air Force would be in contention. For sure. I mean, basically, they're going to get that last slot like they already do with the Cotton Bowl. So that's just going to, that final spot in the 12-team playoff would be like that anyway. You're just basically replacing the New Year's 6 games with playoff. That's all it is.
I'm back.
Well, I definitely think we're about to wrap up. I think sure most of us are tired. It's past midnight, but it's been a lot of fun.
But it is Halloween for sure. But if the weather effects happen again, this is what's going to happen to the weather. That's what's going to happen.
Definitely got to get the belt on that weather.
It's going to get a spanking. That's what it's going to get.
You have any final thoughts, Will?
Yeah, just excited for the Washington USC for sure, and Alabama LSU, Bedlam, ND Clemson will be a fun weekend.
Oh, for sure. I cannot wait for those games. Hope that I, have a decent week with my picks. It's been a lot of tough weeks for him, but it's been a lot of tough games to predict. Appreciate you for being here, Amasiro. Says I got here late, but thanks, gentlemen. Just appreciate you for stopping by. But everyone, like the stream down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Share the stream out on social media. And check out over on Jack's channel as well. Sub to his channel. Give him a like as well. Troy says, good show, guys. Enjoyed it. But appreciate you for coming on, Jackson, doing this. It was a lot of fun doing the initial playoff rankings. We agree with a lot of it. Some of it was a little bit interesting. But overall, I think they did a pretty good job. But it was a blast talking college football tonight with you guys. It was awesome. And definitely maybe be back next week to do the rankings next week. Not 100% sure how the schedule will work out, but we'll have to see. But thanks for being here, everybody. It was a lot of fun. College football is going to be awesome.